The Pine Gap Facility, often described as Australia's Area 51. But there are many other conspiracies and rumors surrounding this place aside from UFOs and aliens. Spy technology, advanced military weaponry testing. Just what could be going on in this top secret facility, and why have Australians been protesting its existence since day one? In 1975, a pilot and several passengers flying a private plane near Pine Gap's airspace saw something they would never forget. The facility had only started operating 5 years before. Everyone was wondering what the hell was really going on in there, and the passengers and crew were hoping they were going to see something while flying overhead. And see something they did. A large white object appeared, taking off from the base at an incredibly high speed. The object moved so fast that it was nearly impossible for the witnesses to get a good look at it before it vanished into the sky. The pilot, upon landing, reported the sighting. They were told to wait for investigators, and when these investigators arrived, they supposedly told the group to keep their mouths shut about what they'd seen and to forget the incident entirely. Obviously, not all of them did, and if there wasn't already heavy speculation and controversy about this facility amongst the Australian public before, there certainly was now. Now, what exactly is the Pine Gap facility? Sitting right in the middle of the outback, not too far from the remote town of Alice Springs, officially it's known as the Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap, and it's run by both the US and Australian governments. But what exactly goes on there? Like with any facility like this, there's the official answer and the more speculative ones. The facility is decked out with some serious tech. You know those big satellite dishes you see in movies? Pine Gap has plenty of them. They're used for all sorts of high-tech communication and surveillance activity. Officially, the facility is involved in intelligence gathering, satellite tracking, and missile detection. It's always been a controversial place though. It's seen a number of protests over the years, and many of them aren't even necessarily to do with the rumors and conspiracies, but they certainly don't help with its image. Pine Gap is rumored to be a secret site for advanced technology testing. Again, much like claims made about Area 51. A place where the military can try out their fancy new tech far away from the prying eyes of the public. And if you were gonna pick a spot for a test flight over your new advanced drone or aircraft, the Australian outback would be about as ideal as it gets. Ever seen Mad Max? Nothing out there but sand and kangaroos. I don't think there's actually any kangaroos in Mad Max, but you get my point. One of the main theories is that Pine Gap is involved in developing and testing advanced drones and aircraft. These drones could be used for anything from reconnaissance missions to lethal attacks. More on that next though. There are also rumors about Pine Gap being involved in cyber warfare testing, so developing new ways to protect against hacking or creating offensive strategies to mess with enemy computers. That's really the best way I can put it without doing a deep dive into exactly what hackers do on this kind of scale. I don't really know much about hacking other than the error messages I'd get that would screw up my janky old PC in the days of LimeWire. One of the biggest conspiracies is that Pine Gap is involved in operating spy satellites. I'd say a big part of this is the fact that it's jointly operated by the United States and Australia. It's partly run by the CIA, so that leads to some speculation for sure. It's rumored that Pine Gap plays a huge role in monitoring communications, radar, and other electronic signals from all over the world. The facility's remote location and the sophisticated tech make it a pretty ideal setup for controlling and receiving data from spy satellites orbiting Earth. There's a lot of speculation that Pine Gap works with various intelligence agencies to gather information on foreign military activity, enemy organizations, and just various global threats. I mean, this is barely even in the realm of conspiracy. It is a fact. It's involved in intelligence gathering, so I don't think spy satellites are really all that much of a stretch. It's really more of a question of, well, what exactly does this entail? Of course, they don't provide specifics because that would kind of defeat the purpose of the whole spying thing. Another one.
10th spot, we have the fossilized microbes. So this piece of controversial evidence came from Mars and was announced in 1996. NASA scientists announced that they had potentially found what appeared may be fossilized microbes in a lump of Martian rock. It is likely that this rock came off during some sort of Mars collision and just casually floated around the solar system for 15 million years before landing in Antarctica in 1984. Just casual space stuff. After analyzing the rock, it was revealed that it contained organic molecules and small specks of mineral magnetite, which is sometimes found in the bacteria on Earth. Upon further analysis with an electron microscope, it was claimed that there were signs of nanobacteria. Since then, some claim that the magnetite wasn't that similar to those found in bacteria, and there is belief that the signs of the nanobacteria could have been grown in a lab. In our number 9 spot today, we have Oumuamua. A few years ago, scientists all agreed that we had found an object that was flying through our solar system, and they called it Oumuamua, and it was widely agreed that it was an interstellar comet that had swung out from around another star. Upon closer examination, however, they realized that something was propelling it, causing it to accelerate, and this is when the debate started, because they just don't really know why. Avi Loeb, who's a Harvard University astrophysicist, proposed the idea that rather than a comet, this could be an alien probe that is being pushed by a light sail, which is a very wide but extremely thin piece of material that accelerates by being pushed by solar radiation. Other scientists didn't agree with this and instead said that it's possible that hydrogen ice could have melted off of the object in a way that would mimic a rocket engine or something of that nature. Avi then wrote in a study that hydrogen ice is too easily heated and it would have melted off long before it reached our solar system. I guess we really just have to wait it out while the scientists debate and gather more evidence to really know what was going on behind this one. In our number 8 spot today, we have cyanobacteria. For around 2 decades, Dr. Richard Hoover has been studying meteorites that were found in Antarctica, and in 2011 he claimed that he and his team had found evidence of ancient bacteria from colonies that thrived on comets, moons, and other planets. The astrobiologist said that they were able to make this discovery through the use of the most advanced microscanning technology in the entire world. Dr. Hoover sliced open these meteorites and discovered what they call the remains of cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae. Different type of algae though. This type of algae is said to have a unique ability and quality to thrive even in some of the harshest conditions, which is necessary when talking about surviving the extreme environment some other planets hold, as well as just space in general, alright? It's not very kind. Dr. Hoover said that while some of the bacteria he had found was similar to those on Earth, some of the others were completely alien. He said, quote, "Neither I nor the experts who have seen the evidence have any idea what these creatures might be. I believe these findings indicate that life is not restricted to Earth, but is broadly distributed even outside of our solar system." In our number 7 spot today, we have the new material. Of course, when meteorites show up to Earth, people are dying to get their hands on them to study them and see what all they contain. We get some pretty incredible deliveries of things that arrive on meteorites, and analysis has been able to identify about 300 minerals in different space debris that comes down to Earth, and 40 of those are ones that have only been found in meteorites. But this is all very cool and interesting, but one of the most fascinating is the Allende meteorite. This is one that exploded over Mexico in 1969, and after analyzing samples from it in 2012, scientists announced the discovery of a material that had never been seen on Earth, and that frankly, no one even knew was possible to make. It was called penguinite, and it consists of quite a strange variety of elements including titanium, zirconium, and scandium. In our number 6 spot today, we have Stardust. Just a few years ago, researchers in Australia made a startling discovery. Ancient grains that were discovered inside of a meteorite that had landed inside of the country were studied, and it was revealed that they were actually grains of stardust. Okay, I know this is Australia, not America, but what am I to do, alright? Stardust? I can't leave that out. This dust was formed somewhere around 5 to 7 billion years ago, and it is now the oldest solid material ever found on Earth. These kind of pre-solar grains are a very rare find. In fact, they're so rare that they're only found in about 5% of meteorites that have fallen to Earth. This is a fascinating discovery because having something like this really is the next best thing aside from having the actual star itself, and it gives insight into our universe billions of years ago.
10. Astronaut sightings. Who better to trust about what's going on in space than people who have actually been to space before? That's right, numerous astronauts over the years have reported seeing things that they think might be UFOs. Buzz Aldrin was one of the astronauts aboard the Apollo 11, and during their journey they all reported seeing flying objects. Of course, space debris exists, and it could just be some metal junk that was adrift in space. But then why did they report that the objects appeared to be following them? When they thought that it might might have just been a detached part of the rocket that was flying alongside them, they were informed that this piece was actually 6,000 miles away from them, and they definitely wouldn't have been able to see it from that far away. He also said that when they brought it up, they were briefed to not talk about what they had seen out in space. Well, the government can try all they want to cover things up, but eventually word always gets out. Number 9. Paintings. Now let's go well beyond spaceships and astronauts and move into the far more distant past, because alien sightings certainly aren't a new thing and seem to have been around for centuries. One piece of evidence that people often cite is a painting titled The Madonna with Saint Giovannino. It was painted in the 15th century by Dominic Ghirlandaio and appears to depict a UFO flying around in the background, its shape matching up with people's frequent depictions of flying saucers as being alien spacecrafts. There also appear to be beams of light coming out from the bottom of the ship, and this has led people to believe that it is unmistakably an alien craft and not just something else placed up in the sky. And if you take a look at it, it does seem hard to believe that it could be anything else, as what other dark object would make sense to be floating in the sky like that? If you have any ideas, let me know what else you think it might be. Number 8. The Tic Tac UFO. Back in 2004 on the coast of California, a US Navy pilot named David Fravor reported seeing something strange. In fact, he reported seeing something that was, quote, something not from this earth. They were about 60 to 100 miles off the coast of California, and he was leading a strike fighter squadron through some exercises when the incident occurred. He said that he saw a tic-tac shaped vessel flying through the air at incredible speeds, but it wasn't just him who saw it. It was also reported by another flight crew who actually followed after the craft and even filmed it. While the footage was originally kept classified, it's now been made available to the public. The case was then published by the New York Times after the Pentagon acknowledged its Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which is actually the Pentagon's own 21st century study of UFO sightings. Number 7. Wow! Exclamation point. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, otherwise known as SETI, is a group that, well, searches for extraterrestrial intelligence. In 1977, a large radio telescope outside of Ohio was scanning the skies on behalf of SETI when they picked up a signal that lasted for 72 seconds. The printouts of readings often included low numbers, which was typically just the background noise that the telescope picked up. But then a scientist noticed that there was a sudden string of letters as well as larger numbers. The letters went all the way up to U, which indicated a signal 30 times stronger than the typical background noise. Upon seeing these consecutive letters, which would represent a very strong signal and something potentially alien, he circled them and wrote the word wow followed by an exclamation point in bright red pen. To this day, we've never really seen anything else like it, and the extraordinary readout has yet to ever be duplicated. Number 6. Viking Mars. Now let's get into some more sciencey factual stuff. When people think of aliens, the term that might often come to mind is Martians, being attributed specifically to aliens that reside on the planet of Mars. NASA has sent a lot of things out there, and one expedition was referred to as Viking, them sending out little robots to take readings of the planet. One test that they performed was done on the soil, mixing soil with radioactive carbon-labeled nutrients to see if they would produce radioactive methane gas, this being a chemical sign of life on other planets. And it did, the test coming back with a positive result and finding organic molecules, but NASA just brushed it off, I guess, because they said that the other experiments didn't end up with the same results, so they just said it was a false positive. But one of the original scientists and others who have analyzed the data stand by their discovery, saying that the other experiments had just been ill-equipped for performing the tests and finding the same results. Number 5.
Number 10 is Saint Wolfgang and the Devil. Famously painted by Michael Patcher during the 15th century, Saint Wolfgang and the Devil is said to be based around a legend of Saint Wolfgang, the Bishop of Regensburg, during the 10th century. As the legend goes, Saint Wolfgang saw a church within his heart and vowed to build it. One day he struck an axe to the ground in the place where it was to be built, but after having trouble finding someone to help him, he managed to enlist and trick the devil into building the church for him. There's a lot more to it, but that's essentially the gist. However, nowadays, internet sleuths who come across this famous painting have been quick to point out that the creature seen in it looks less like the devil, but more like a creepy winged alien. And I mean,
part of me does get it. Like, just take a second to look at the creature. It's literally depicted as a scaly green monster with a second face on his butt, which is unlike any depiction of the devil I have yet to come across. So could it have been an alien? Your guess is as good as mine. Coming in at number 9, rock drawings in Val Camonica. First described in 1909 by geographer Walter Lang, these petroglyphs, or rock drawings, are believed to date back to roughly 10,000 BC. Now, this wouldn't be the first time that rock drawings had been used in the case for alien contact. Take the Wangina, for example. They have on more than one occasion been used as proof of ancient alien contact, but these rock drawings found in Italy are in particular a little extra suspicious. Many believe that they look like two people in strange helmets, yielding unidentifiable weapons, which, to be fair, does sound pretty alien-like. And between the humanoid figures dressed in protective suits and the sheer amount of these that exist in the area, I wouldn't totally rule out some alien hands in the pie. Like, just look at these drawings. I have to admit, they do look like ancient astronauts, a concept that would not have existed back then, unless they were depicting some strange alien race visiting them from the sky. Coming in at number 8, Israel, Put Your Hope in the Lord. Dating back to the 1600s, this painting shows a house surrounded by thunderclouds with a strange gray disc hovering over the house with what appears to be smoke or maybe even fire coming out of the top. And, I mean, it's hard to not get the UFO claims on this one. Some who wish to disprove the alien spaceship theory have pointed out it's probably meant to represent God, wielding a shield, hence the gray circle coming down from the sky. And to be fair, I can see that being true. But I can also see this being a spaceship, because I mean, well, look at it. Also, the UFO is like right in the prime time abducting setting, thunderous storms, limited visibility, over a house, blaming God for the disappearance. I mean, it's got all the pieces. The only question is, which one is true? Coming in at number 7, Strange Silver Man. Dating back to 700 BC, when it was first discovered in the frosty Altai region where the Russian and Chinese borders meet, archaeologists first believed it would have belonged to the Scythian people, a notoriously aggressive tribe with a reputation that preceded them in their time. Apparently, the warriors were well known for killing their enemies and drinking their blood out of a bowl fashioned from their skull. So yeah, some scary folks. However, if it was an artifact from then, what was it meant to represent? Once the picture got out to the public, many people were saying that this mysterious figure was more like a spooky spacesuit wearing alien than anything else. Begging the question, was it made by aliens or made by the Scythians for the aliens? I guess we won't ever know for sure unless aliens come down again and tell us for themselves. Coming in at number 6, the Svetoshoveli Cathedral fresco from the 1600s. While there are lots of suspicious beams of light in old historical paintings, that isn't the only thing that has made people uneasy over the years. This 17th century painting depicting the crucifixion of Jesus also comes with some questionably alien looking blobs. Well, at first you are likely to just notice Jesus on the cross, right smack in the middle. If you take a second to glance on either side of him, you may notice some oddly shaped blobs in the corners. While art historians explain that these are meant to represent angels watching the event, or potentially even the moon and sun, which was also common at the time. While art historians explain that these are meant to represent angels watching the event, or potentially the moon and sun, which was also common at the time. However, lots of alien believers out there have a different theory, that they are UFOs. Now, if you ask me, they look a little bit more like jellyfish than anything else, but I do see the UFO resemblance. Now, to be fair, some believers of the conspiracy have also suggested it could be a mix of both. Maybe aliens came down from the sky, but people just assumed they were angels since well, what else would have been coming down from the sky? If only we could travel back in time to see what was really there. Coming history. Starting us off at number 10 is the Madonna with St. John. Dating back to the 15th century, this iconic painting is arguably one of the most debated depictions of alien life on Earth. Likely painted by Domenico Galileo. I mean, there is debate there too, but that's another story. However, as you can see, it depicts the Madonna with baby Jesus and St. John. However, if you zoom into the top right corner, you'll notice something very strange. There is an unnamed man shielding his eyes from what looks like a bright light in the sky, and beside him is a dog staring up at the same shining object. The object appears to be strangely similar to most modern depictions of a UFO, painted as a dark oval with light rays shooting out from every angle, and has definitely been the subject of much debate among alien believers and non-believers for decades. Now, it wasn't unusual for the time to paint angels or other celestial beings brightly shining down on us from the sky, but as this specific painting appears to have no such addition to the light and is simply a strangely specific flying saucer, it has led many to believe that the painter was depicting a real-life alien sighting. And truth be told, it wasn't the first time such things showed up in artwork, and it is also not the last. Could it really be a UFO? I don't know, you tell me. Coming in at number 9, coins. During a house renovation in Egypt, a group of workers say that they found 2 coins that had very unusual portraits on them. The first they found resembles the head and shoulders of an alien, while the other looks more like it depicts an alien spaceship landing, and they immediately freaked out. Plus, one of them apparently had the words opportunus adest carved on the back, which is Latin for there is an opportunity, which definitely comes across a little spooky. I won't lie, there's a lot of debate around the validity of these coins. As many have pointed out, the coins could have easily been manipulated by believers, but it has been countered by the fact that either way, there's no actual concrete proof that they don't come from aliens. I mean, I have some questions. Would aliens even use currency like us, let alone physical currency? I honestly have no clue, but I mean, if I came across these coins, I too might be just as suspicious about their origin. Coming in at number 8, the Second Punic War sightings. During the Second Punic War, which occurred in ancient Rome between 218 and 201 BC, there were apparently many sightings of strange sky phenomenon that today believers claim were aliens coming down to Earth. These alleged sightings were found in the Annales Maximi, which is essentially a historical record kept by the chief high priest during the Roman Republic, and in it is the tale of a day in 218 BC where ships that apparently gleamed in the sky came out of clouds and stayed floating in the sky. And I mean, I don't blame anyone for jumping to an alien conclusion on that one. Then 2 years later, in 216 BC, a similar sighting was documented where large gleaming round shields allegedly traveled through the air. Conspiracy theorists have clung on to these writings, pointing out how both descriptions can easily be imagined as the common UFO described in our modern era. Plus, this war was not the only one in history to claim such things happening in the sky. I mean, just like everything else on this list, will we ever know if the writings in the historical record really were an alien sighting? Probably not, unless we can figure out a time traveling situation, but it is a little suspicious, I would say. Coming in at number 7, Egyptian hieroglyphs. There's a lot of debate around alien involvement in ancient Egypt, and aside from the eternal debate of if aliens helped build the pyramids, hieroglyphs depict just about the most suspicious signs of extraterrestrial help. Now, I'll be the first to say that I don't think all hieroglyphs point towards ancient alien invasion, but that doesn't mean that there aren't a few that raise an eyebrow. One in particular is a hieroglyph appearing to show the Egyptians in possession of electricity, which, if that were true, feels like a surefire sign that they were not alone down here. The tableau depicts what appears to be people holding an electric lamp or maybe a light bulb, and believers have not wasted any time adding this to their Rolodex of reasons. And it's not just electricity that ancient Egyptians may have possessed, but other hieroglyphs seem to portray other forms of advanced technology that, in theory, they would have no way of knowing about. Hieroglyphs with a spooky resemblance to helicopters or planes have been found and gone viral, only adding to the mystery of how on earth this could have been something they would possibly know about. Could it be that aliens came down and gave them knowledge to advance their technology? Could the alleged airplane drawings be a UFO they saw in the sky? Conspiracy theorists say absolutely. Coming in at number 6, Doggu. Not every sign of alien life has to do with a UFO sightings, sometimes the signs are a bit more subtle. Dating back roughly to between the years of 14,000 and 400 BC, ancient Japan was known for crafting small human-like statues out of clay called Doggu. These statues usually measure between 4 to 12 inches, and while the exact reason for their construction remains under speculation, there are two main theories. The first is that Doggu were created as part of an ancient healing and fertility ritual, which could very well be true. However, the second one is a little more intriguing as it involves aliens. Now, if you take a look at these statues, they don't just look like a normal human statue. They have a strange, bulbous sort of look to them with large beanie baby eyes and kind of appear to be wearing what some have described as a stylized spacesuit. That, along with the helmeted head, has created a ton of speculation around if they were in fact modeled after aliens who visited ancient Japan and made contact with its inhabitants. I suppose we might never know for sure, but it's definitely an interesting theory.
With aliens. At number 10 is the alien in custody. So this former Air Force intelligence officer spilled the beans at a congressional hearing about how the US government has been keeping a lid on some of this wild alien stuff. Apparently, there's a lot more to UFOs than just rumors. At this congressional hearing, there were these three folks, David Grush, David Fravor, and Ryan Graves, all of whom used to work in the military. Fravor and Graves claimed that they saw these weird flying objects multiple times, like almost as if it was some kind of normal routine for them. And then there's Commander Ryan Grush, who didn't see any himself, but he talked about this top secret government program supposedly dealing with alien tech dating way back. Like, we're talking about stuff recovered from the 1930s, but however, the Pentagon's all, nope, never happened. The hearing made it clear that even Congress themselves are being left out of the loop. Some senators want a review board to release all classified UFO records. It's pretty intense, especially since people are thinking that this could be all a big deal for national security. Graves said it right himself, we deserve to know what's happening in our skies. At number 9 is the Interstellar base on Mars. Are we already in touch with aliens? A former head of Israel's space program is suggesting that humans have been mingling with aliens for years. Haim Eshed, a reputable figure with a long track record in space endeavors, dropped a bombshell about secretive interactions between the US and extraterrestrial beings. This 87-year-old Israeli insider spilled the beans on deals struck between the USA and aliens. Supposedly, they're teaming up to dig into the mysteries of the universe. He even went on to say that Elon Musk's whole life mission of colonizing Mars is all kind of for nothing because according to him, we've already done it. Yeah. Apparently, we already have a secret base hidden underground on Mars where Americans and aliens are working side by side. Pretty wild to think about the implications if this is true. Imagine humans rubbing shoulders with creatures beyond our planet, like not even in a Hollywood movie, but in real life. What would they look like? How do they communicate? What amazing things could we learn from them? It's like diving into a science fiction story, except according to Eshed, this is our reality. If you're enjoying this video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Most Amazing, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 are the 8 interstellar messages. 8 mysterious signals from outer space recently caught the attention of scientists. These signals might be from aliens. Scientists published their findings in a fancy science journal called Nature Astronomy. Now, why are these signals such a big deal? Well, scientists always keep an eye out for signals from outer space because they might be aliens trying to talk to us. These signals could show that there's someone out there using technology to try and communicate with us. But hold up, how do we know that these signals are from aliens? It's a good question. You see, these alien signals are different from regular human signals, or just pulsars, for example. Humans use wide-range signals for things like phones and Wi-Fi, but these alien signals, they're narrow and way different. That's what makes them special, and possibly from alien technology. Now, how did scientists discover these signals? Well, they used a clever AI program with a cool telescope. This AI checked 812 star systems from data collected by a satellite called Hippocros. And guess what? It found 8 signals that seemed promising that could possibly be from aliens. However, when scientists looked again, the signals were gone all of a sudden. Why? Nobody knows for sure. Maybe the aliens are being shy or just not that into chatting with us. But hey, it's still exciting because this means that there's somebody out there trying to reach us just from far, far away. At number 7 is NASA's golden record. Yeah, I'm talking about the Voyager golden records, basically those groovy golden discs that got launched into space in 1969. 1977. For those of you who don't know, the NASA Voyager is the first man-made object to ever leave our solar system, and so scientists thought, hey, if aliens ever find this thing, maybe we should leave some clues about how to find us. Carl Sagan, this big shot astrophysicist, and his team put a bunch of cool stuff on these records, like sounds of Earth, music, greetings in different languages, and they even managed to encode some pictures into it. But here's the kicker: how would aliens even know what to do with this freaking disc? Like, imagine just stumbling upon a weird disc, gold with symbols all over it, and having no clue how to play it or even what it is in the first place. Just pretty confusing. So basically, we can't exactly use stuff like English or like numbers or anything relatively human in general to try and communicate with these aliens, because their point of reference might be completely different from ours. So we had to work really hard to come up with universal symbols in order to essentially create a language that will allow the aliens to crack the code. So on the golden record is a diagram which is supposed to depict a hydrogen atom. Now, essentially what's going on in the diagram is that it's depicting the electron of the hydrogen atom flipping its spin. Now, every element produces a certain wavelength when their electron flips their spin, and it's unique to each element. So if aliens can figure that out, now have a number that they can use for reference for the entire thing. And so there's also that cool star-looking map that's called a pulsar map. Essentially, the ends of the lines are supposed to depict pulsar stars. So they're essentially cosmic lighthouses, these stars that spin around really fast thanks to their magnetic poles and emit a beam of light. Each pulsar has its own unique frequency at the way it spins, and so using our hydrogen wavelength from earlier, aliens will be able to decipher which stars those are exactly, and thus be able to pinpoint where our planet is, which is all really convoluted and really cool. So cool, in fact, that I have it tattooed on my back. Anyways, these records also have some uranium stuff on their covers. Not dangerous though. They're meant to act as a clock telling aliens when exactly the records were sent out. So these records aren't just saying hi to aliens, they're also like a time capsule, which is pretty wild. But seriously, decoding messages to aliens is a whole other level of coolness. At number 6 is the Olympic broadcast. In 1974, humans shot a message to space from a massive telescope in Puerto Rico, but nobody actually heard it. We've been accidentally sending stuff like old TV shows into space for a while, which sounds pretty cool, but is kind of concerning. It might give the wrong first impression if our alien neighbors catch our TV shows. Now, some TV signals aren't nearly strong enough to escape our planet. While some are weak, while others might go a little bit stronger with their signal, but eventually they degrade over time. Even if they reached deep space, they'd be pretty quiet. Like dropping a pebble in the Pacific Ocean and expecting somebody in Japan to notice the ripple from California. So even if aliens picked up our stuff, they might not understand it as images or sound. They would just know it's tech made by somebody, but that's about it. Now, in the Olympics, during the reign leading to World War II, the famous dictator with the mustache delivered a speech, and that broadcast was so loud and powerful, it might actually be the very first thing that aliens discover about us. Yeah, imagine if we met them like, hey, we got a message from you. Yeah, that was from our worst guy, like, ever. At number 4
Up list with a pretty insane news story that didn't really make the rounds over here, which is surprising because this is absolutely nuts. So last year, residents of a small isolated village in Peru claimed to have been attacked in the night by 7-foot-tall alien beings with glowing yellow eyes. They also had dark hoods and wore armor. They looked a bit like Green Goblin from Spider-Man. At one point, one of the beings even tried to kidnap a young woman of the village. And these attacks happened repeatedly, to the point where many villagers said they were living in fear. A number of residents claimed to have fired at the creatures, but they didn't go down. They could also fly. This was all over South American news. The Peruvian military was even called in to do night patrols. So what the hell was going on here? Well, the media has now come out saying that the attacks weren't aliens, but they were just illegal miners dressed as aliens trying to scare the villagers off. But how does that explain them being seemingly immune to bullets or flying? Carlos Castro Quintanilla, the prosecutor investigating the case, believes that the miners must have been using state-of-the-art technology that allowed them to fly. What does he think these illegal miners, what do they somehow have access to jetpacks? I don't know. I'm not buying that. I'm on the fence about this one. It could be illegal miners. Maybe they had bulletproof vests. But the jetpack thing, I've seen real life jetpacks, and they are clunky messes. They're just, first of all, no one has access to those things, and even like flying them around, it's just, it's not a smooth kind of thing. We don't have jetpacks, all right? Plus, I think these villagers are smart enough to know the difference between people in masks and awful jetpacks and alien beings. I don't know. A whole bunch of these villagers all said they saw this, so it's interesting.
Next up, we have the Battle of Los Angeles, or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, which took place on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. That night, all of Los Angeles went under blackout as directed by the US military, meaning all lights were off. And while the lights on the ground had been turned off, the sky above was lit up by a myriad of strange, unidentified flying objects. The military opened fire, and onlookers were absolutely stunned as 1,400 rounds of ammunition fired up into the sky appeared to have no effect on the UFO or UFOs. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found, in the sky or on the ground. Shrapnel that appeared to have ricocheted off of the target resulted in the death of 5 civilians. 3 more were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more of heart attacks due to the stress of the 2-hour-long attack. To this day, it is unknown what objects filled the sky of Los Angeles that night. The event went down in history as one of the largest UFO sightings to date. We really don't know what happened, but if you have any theories, feel free to let us know in the comments.
Next on the list, we have the Shag Harbor Incident. At 11:20 p.m. on October 4th, 1967, multiple witnesses in Nova Scotia watched as a mysterious object crashed into the waters of Shag Harbor. But let's backtrack a little and go over some of the other sightings from that night leading up to this. It all began with Air Canada Flight 305, where First Officer Robert Ralph alerted Captain Pierre Charbonneau to a strange object outside the aircraft over Sherbrooke in Saint John, Quebec. It was described as a brightly lit rectangular object with smaller lights trailing it. Meanwhile, Daryl Dory and his family in Mahone Bay saw a large object in the sky. Captain Leo Howard Mercy, a fisherman, witnessed stationary blips on his radar. He, along with his crew, then looked up to see 4 bright objects in a rectangular formation in the sky. News stations were also being flooded with numerous other people reporting glowing objects over Halifax. And then we have the crash. A ton of residents reported hearing a whoosh, followed by a loud bang, and at least 11 people reported seeing a low-flying object crash into the water of Shag Harbor. I'm sure you hear a lot of banging sounds around Shag Harbor. Terrible joke. Witnesses watched as an object with glowing lights floated in the water. It was just kind of like floating there. The RCMP was then called in, who then contacted the Rescue Coordination Center, but before they could arrive, the object started to sink into the water. The Coast Guard was called in, as well as the military. No debris or survivors were found, and according to the Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax, all commercial, private, and military aircraft, they were all accounted for along the eastern seaboard. Whatever this object was, it's never been identified, and it has been officially designated as an unidentified flying object.
Next on our list,
10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought like we're under attack by aliens. It was scary." Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The coin incident. At At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the Coin Incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like limp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earlyst Photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival. As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sightings, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage Country in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and Second Deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spar and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spar began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer pulled into a gas station, where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that. Number 5.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Holy Trinity. The Paracas candelabra is a mysterious geoglyph located in the Paracas Peninsula in Peru. It is a large figure carved into the side of a hill measuring over 180 meters in length, and it is visible from the sea. The geoglyph depicts a candelabra-like figure with a central stem and 3 branches extending outwards. Cactus-like, some would say. The exact age and purpose of the Paracas candelabra remains unknown, but it is believed to have been created by the Paracas culture who inhabit inhabited the region from 800 BCE to 100 BCE. In other words, it's very old. This geoglyph is now considered an important archaeological site and a cultural landmark of Peru, attracting tourists and researchers who are all of course intrigued by its history and symbolism. The stuff just blows my mind. In our number 9 spot today we have the Dark Ages tomb. Looking back to the Dark Ages in Shamir Heights, northern Israel, this tomb is quite large. Made up of 400 tons of boulders and stretching 65 feet wide, this burial chamber goes back 4,000 years. It could mean that humans were part of an organized society that long ago, especially considering the art that they found on the ceiling inside the dolmen. This is the first time art has been documented in one of these chambers in the Middle East, and we haven't quite figured out what the ceiling carvings depict yet. So far, we think arrows or anchors. Inside the actual grave, there were 3 sets of human remains, so it has been used for quite a while. While excavating the ancient grave site, archaeologists also found colored beads. One of the most intriguing parts of the grave has to be the lines carved in the ceiling. All those lines connecting to one arc. What does it mean? In our number 8 spot today we have the Nazca lines. We've all heard of alien crop circles at one point or another. I remember watching the movie Signs when I was younger. And then I couldn't sleep for 13 years. The birthday party scene is just too much for me. And that is exactly why this next one freaked me out. Just 200 miles southeast of Peru, we can find hundreds of markings etched into the earth. They're massive pieces of art, like crop circles, but more intimidating. The biggest ground graffiti spans over 1,200 feet. Many people believe this was an ancient ritual for water. Given its location, that theory checks out. Another theory written in 1968 in Eric von Daniken's book Chariots of the God suggests that ancient Nazca was a site for alien visitors, leaving behind knowledge in the form of these massive doodles and technology. One of them just says Garbazar was here. We're like, oh, nice. In our number 7 spot today we have the Ice Age art. More ancient artwork, this time from the Colombian Amazon. Thing is, unlike other drawings found on the ceilings of tombs, this canvas stretches about 8 miles. The paintings are even more impressive, dating back to 12,000 years ago. These were made near the end of the last Ice Age. Thousands of paintings, by the way, not just a handful of arrows either. These were found in 2017, but it was only last year when they went public with the findings. The findings being paintings of elephants, massive sloths, horses from the Ice Age, snakes, birds, deer. This is now one of the largest collections of rock art in South America. Pregnant women or the origins of the Ninja Turtles? You tell me. In our number 6 spot today we have Tomb KV55. Located in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, Tomb 55, otherwise known as KV55, was discovered by Edward Ayrton back in 1907. And the reason we call this tomb by a number rather than a name is because we really don't know who or what is inside. Even the walls inside aren't like other tombs, covered in ancient hieroglyphs, tipping the reader off on the noble history of the king that lies before them. Nothing is here. The only hint that remains is one hieroglyph, and it translates to, "The evil one shall not live again." Even these massive stones were built in order to prevent anything from getting out. Usually with these ancient tombs, it's the opposite. The description for those inside the tomb has also been destroyed, so we have no idea who's in KV55 or what. Many believe it's Akhenaton, and back then they didn't believe in multiple gods, just one. So Akhenaton got on the wrong foot with the high priests, and over his 17 years of ruling, he was convincing everybody that their art and religion was wrong, and there was only one god in existence. This was the sun god. His own son, King Tut, succeeded him and luckily restored the previous religion, but maybe the sun god was passing knowledge to him, or maybe he just loved staring at the sun. Or maybe aliens. Honestly, we gotta tie it back in somehow. In our number...
Are these figurines supposed to be? Would you ever think that they were meant to depict humans? Certainly don't look human to me, but it's not just because they're very old sculptures. I mean, they look intentionally not human. They look reptilian. The noses, or lack thereof, the eyes, if these were meant to resemble people, they did a bad job. Either that or these were really horrifying looking folks. But if they're not meant to be human humans, then what exactly are they? The statues are often referred to as the Ubaid lizard men. The 7,000-year-old artifacts were uncovered in Iraq in the 20th century. There are theories as to what these things could be, but no definitive evidence. Unfortunately, we don't have any written records of the time, so determining the ideas behind people's artistic expression in prehistoric Mesopotamia, it's not really the easiest, but I'm pretty fascinated by the idea that there may have been some reptilian aliens visiting Earth around this time that people were depicting here.
Definitive proof of life beyond our planet found inside of a meteorite that landed in Sri Lanka back in December of 2013. Yeah. When pieces of the space rock were gathered and examined back in 2013, a shocking discovery was made. The debris of the meteor contained fossils, algae fossils, of clear extraterrestrial origin, according to lead scientist Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe. Because algae is technically alive, if Professor Chandra's science is correct, the discovery marks the first documented discovery of life that originated from outside of our atmosphere. While the legitimacy of the work has been debated amongst Chandra's peers, who claim that the algae may have been embedded into the meteorite during its time on Earth, the professor is standing firm in his discovery and has claimed that among the algae fossils he discovered were other organisms that are not yet identified and do not match anything discovered on Earth thus far, which of course is great news for those of us who are really hoping that Chandra's discovery of extraterrestrial life is legitimate and that the doubters are just mad they weren't able to make the discovery for themselves.
Are these sculptures of planes? They kind of look like stylized planes to me, but that would be impossible because these are thousands of years old. They're artifacts from what is known as the Kumbaya period, a pre-Columbian culture which was around from about 500 BC to 600 AD. They were known for their skill in metalwork. I mean, obviously these things are lovely, but yeah, they really do look remarkably like modern airplanes. They have wings that don't really look like bird wings to me, and a lot of them even have what look like tail fins. So how and why were these created? Did these people somehow have knowledge of what the future of air travel was going to look like? Were they encountering beings with highly advanced technology? The official explanation is that these are depictions of animals, insects, birds, that sort of thing, and yeah, there's a very good chance that's all these are, but I can't deny how eerily accurate they look to modern flying machines. And here's another really interesting thing. In 1994, a group of German engineers actually built scale models of the Kumbaya artifacts to see if they could fly, and guess what? They did, with an added propulsion system of course, but the designs worked. They were aerodynamically perfect and could fly.
The Williams Enigmalth. What is it? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely from out of this world. It looks a bit like a rock with a plug, but it's not a rock with a plug, and it's far from being just an ordinary rock. The object was found in 1998 by a hiker named John J. Williams. He noticed a strange piece of metal coming out of the dirt on his hiking trail, and so he dug it up. When he did, he revealed a rock with 3 metal prongs sticking out of it. It looked somehow man-made and appeared to have some kind of electrical component to it. Why? Well, I'm not sure, but Williams, who is an electrical engineer, claims that the electronic component embedded in the stone was not glued or welded into the granite rock surrounding it, meaning that while it appears to have possibly been man-made, because electrical components don't just naturally exist inside of rocks, especially ones dated to be around 100,000 years old, it must be something else, perhaps from somewhere else, perhaps somewhere out of this world. While Williams is open to having others research the strange rock, he does have a few conditions. He must be present for whatever discovery is made, and the rock must remain unharmed. Even with these parameters, you would think that by using modern day tools and technology, we would have been able to get an answer as to what exactly the rock is by now, and where the electrical component is coming from and how it was embedded. But no such discovery has been made, leaving the leading theory to be that its origins are likely not of this Earth, and that it likely holds the answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet.
No one is exactly sure what this thing is. It's been dubbed the Wedge of IUD and was found in Romania in 1973. Workers came across it while digging during a construction project. It was found buried along with 2 large mastodon bones. The wedge is around 5 pounds and it's made of aluminum. Now this turns out to be pretty strange because aluminum wasn't widely used until the 19th century. century, but this thing is estimated to be much older, at least 250,000 years old. It's a very odd looking object, looks like a modern art piece or something, but what exactly is it? Well, again, nobody really knows for sure, but one of the funnest theories, of course, is that it's extraterrestrial in origin, maybe having come off an ancient alien spacecraft or something.
The Roswell Incident is arguably the most famous UFO crash in history, although the government would claim otherwise. Basically, on June 24th of 1947, while searching for a crashed military aircraft, pilot Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 UFOs flying over the Cascade Mountains of Washington state in the US. The objects were flying in formation at a height of about 10,000 feet and a speed of approximately 1,900 kilometers per hour, which was not possible at the time, for humans that is. Kenneth described the way the objects moved as jerky, like rocks skipping over the water, flashing forward at strange intervals. When the media got a hold of the story, they coined the phrase flying saucer, and the UFO craze took off at hyperspeed. Especially when on July 7th, a local rancher named Mac Brazel called the sheriff to let him know that one of those objects had somehow ended up on his farm, and this came to be known as the Roswell Incident.
It was back in July of 1947 that something strange happened near Roswell, New Mexico. Something had crashed into the ground, into Brazel's farm. There were metal pieces, rubber strips, and a strange tin foil-like material. The nearby Roswell Army airfield was alerted. The military came out and collected the debris. At first, they issued a press release saying they had recovered an unknown flying disc. This really got people talking, but just a day later the army changed their story, saying it was actually just a weather balloon. Now, while some of the public took this at face value, it caused some controversy, especially in the years to come. People started to believe that the military was covering up something much bigger, possibly an alien spacecraft crash. Over the years, people started to come forward claiming to have seen the wreckage, and not only were there strange markings on the material described by some as hieroglyphics, but the material was incredibly strong and seemed to almost be impossible to burn. Oh, and of course, people who'd been called to the site to recover the material claimed to have seen bodies that were clearly not human. Over the years, many people have questioned the official explanation for this incident. Even former military personnel and locals said they saw strange things at the crash site, like debris that didn't look like it came from any known aircraft, and even small bodies that didn't seem human. In 1994, the US Air Force released a report saying the debris was from a top secret project called Project Mogul, a project that used high altitude balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. They said the unusual materials found were just parts of these balloons and their sensors, but this explanation didn't satisfy everyone. In 1997, on the 50th anniversary of the incident, the Air Force released another report to address the claims about these alien bodies. They said these were actually just crash test dummies used in military experiments, not extraterrestrial beings. But again, a lot of people were and still are highly skeptical of this. The Roswell incident happened less than 2 years after the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan in 1945. Those bombs were created through a secret project that lasted 3 years and had 3 main sites, including one in New Mexico. So if the government could keep the atomic bomb a secret for so long, why wouldn't they be able and willing to hide information about a crashed UFO landing? Plus, little mannequins? I think most people would look at that and be able to tell the difference between an alien and a crash test dummy.
So this foreign object that landed on Mac Brazel's farm actually did so a few days prior to him calling into the sheriff's department. To be honest, he hadn't thought much of it until he started reading about Kenneth Arnold, flying saucers, and UFOs in the papers. Once he learned about the possible presence of technologically advanced ships with no known origin that likely came from outer space, he began to wonder if that was in fact what had landed on his farm just a few nights ago. And so he gathered up some of the debris and took them down to the local police station. In response, the sheriff immediately contacted the nearby army base, and soon intelligence officer Jesse Marcel had arrived on the scene and instructed Brazel to take him to the crash site so that the two could collect more debris. So let's talk about Jesse Marcel, the first military officer to step foot on the scene of the crash, because apparently apparently, Jesse had a lot to say, according to his son, Jesse Jr., who went on to tell his father's story after his death in 1986. According to Jesse Jr., in 1947, when he was just 10 years old, his father woke him up in the middle of the night, excited after having visited the crash site. Jesse Jr. sat up as Jesse Sr. handed him some of the debris he had collected earlier that day on Brazel's farm, and he told Jesse Jr. to get a good look because the debris were something that he would never see again. They were not of this earth, and the pair simply could not make sense of them. Out of all of the debris his father had brought home, Jesse Jr. said that the one that fascinated him most was a small beam with purple-hued hieroglyphics. I suppose it's not difficult to see why the pair didn't believe the government when they released a report saying that what had been found on the Brazel's farm was nothing more than a discarded weather balloon. But of course, you don't mess with the government. And so for years, both Jesse Jr. and his father kept quiet about what they had seen. That is until in the late 1970s, a man named Stanton Friedman showed up asking questions. Stanton T. Friedman, a nuclear physicist turned ufologist, tracked down Jesse Sr. after being tipped off that a retired military man might know something about the Roswell Incident, something that had been kept from the public for the past 31 years. And it turns out he did. Jesse Sr. told Freeman that the weather balloon story had in fact been a cover-up, and that the original wreckage had been replaced with a weather balloon shortly after military personnel first arrived on the scene. Not only that, but Jesse claimed that despite what their superiors had wanted them to believe, it was incredibly clear to everyone working on the site that the object had in fact been an extraterrestrial spaceship with outstanding craftsmanship and incredibly advanced out-of-this-world technologies. Although, unfortunately, Jesse did claim that he never got to witness the alleged aliens inside of the craft being pulled out, but still, he's ex-military. He was there. It's a pretty compelling case if you ask me.
The first image is a screen grab from a video filmed by a US Marine officer on the 20th of April in 2021 on a military base in 29 Palms, California. After the release of the photograph, multiple Marines came forward to confirm the existence of an aircraft, saying that while the photo showcases only the triangle-shaped formation of bright lights, in person the men were able to make out the black body of the aircraft as well. The unidentified flying object is said to have hovered for 10 minutes in the air before it suddenly vanished without any trace. The men were able to rule out flares for being the cause of the mysterious lights, but were never able to figure out exactly what they saw that night. However, it appears the footage has not been taken lightly, as the Pentagon has started an investigation into just what exactly was seen on the night of April 20th of 2021 in the skies above the 29 Palms military base. Next up, we have a series of photographs taken by cosmonaut Ivan Vanger in August of 2020 whilst aboard the International Space Station that appears to depict 5 unidentified flying objects flying at the same speed while maintaining the same distance between each other as well as their surroundings, moving in a straight line just above the Earth's curved horizon visible in the night sky. Vangar, both surprised and curious, took to Twitter, now named X, to share the footage in hopes of getting some clarity as to exactly what he was looking at. In an exciting unfolding of events, his tweet was picked up by the Russian space agency Roscosmos, and a spokesperson revealed that experts were in fact studying the video in an attempt to determine what exactly Vangar had managed to capture. Did you guys know that Japan was a major hotbed for UFO activity? Because I didn't. But apparently the Pentagon does? In fact, UFO sightings are so common in Japan that its military has reportedly ordered all pilots to disclose any and all identified flying objects directly to the Japanese government. Not only that, but Japanese self-defense forces have also undergone extensive training in relation to UFO sighting protocol. To date, 6 alleged encounters between pilots and UFOs have been reported to the Japanese government, one of which was recorded, and depicts 10 white circular balls flying through the skies of Osaka in Japan. While the government has yet to publicly comment on any of the incidents, the update of self-defense protocol alone is pretty telling. The next image was shared by a pretty reputable source, National Geographic. The image was captured by Sergio Loaiza on September 4th of 1971 during an aerial survey of Lake Cote. Everything seemed pretty normal until the photos were taken back to Loaiza's development lab, where he noticed something very strange. A metallic flying aircraft, estimated to have a diameter of 160 feet, was located in the corner of one of the photographs. When he presented the photos to his superiors at the National Geographic Institute, they shut him down
quick, forbidding Sergio as well as his colleagues from sharing any information of what they had seen that day. In 1979, however, the photograph was leaked, and the object that appeared in the image was officially classified as an unidentified flying object. In 2021, the existence of the object was again confirmed after the original copy of the photograph was scanned, and it was revealed that the UFO's presence was more than just a scratch on the lens or a piece of dust in the wind. So what do you think it was? Let us know in the comments. Next up, we have footage that comes to us straight from the declassifieds. Remember how I told you at the beginning of the video that the government quite literally copped to the fact that they have been hiding the existence of UFOs for years? Well, they did, and they came with receipts. On the 15th of January in 2023, while surveilling an MQ-9 Reaper aircraft, an unidentified aerial presence was captured moving at speeds unreachable by any of Earth's modern-day technological advances. Not only this, but as the object whizzed through the field of view of the camera lens, it appeared to leave behind an atmospheric wake before disappearing completely into the sky. Guys, if you have any, please leave your UFO and alien stories in the comments. I would love to hear about your experiences with any of these kind of things. Long we have looked for life in space within the parameters of what constitutes life to us: DNA, RNA, and nucleic acids. But there is a theory, the different kind of life theory, that states this is the reason why we haven't been successful in our search, because life outside of Earth does not need any of the things that we do to survive. Their cells get instructions in biochemical ways completely different from our own. Going off of this, one can assume that planets previously deemed as uninhabitable and therefore removed from the search area for extraterrestrial life might actually be the exact place where alien life forms could be found. The statement that only 1 in a million planets have the right combination of chemicals, temperature, water, days, and nights to support planetary life as we know it completely discounts planetary life as we don't. Extraterrestrials who operate on an incredibly different fundamental and chemical level than our own might be lurking right in our cosmic backyard, we just haven't been searching for them properly. The faraway theory is a pretty straightforward one. The reason we have yet to find aliens is because they are too far away and moving further away by the minute. Basically, the theory states that due to the expansion of the universe, galaxies are constantly moving further and further away from one another, and the further they become, the faster they move, which means it's highly likely that we miss that sweet spot of alien interaction due to the fact that our society was just too underdeveloped when aliens inhabited galaxies that were close enough to communicate with. Either that or humanity didn't miss it, but we did, because it already happened some 6,000 years ago, which would explain the pyramids and many ancient civilizations' fascinations with the stars. Either way, we're SOL for distance. But maybe we haven't found aliens yet because we haven't been communicating properly. Here's the thing. For the better half of a century, humanity has been leaking radio signals into space at such a rate that any intelligent life form within 100 light years of Earth would surely be able to pick up the signal. But as tech improves, these radio leaks reduce, and one day they might disappear altogether, and the Earth might fall back into radio silence. Perhaps the same is the case for other planets, and the reason we haven't been able to hear their radio signals and they haven't heard any of ours is simply because in the cosmic scope of time, the radio signals just don't last that long and our timing is off. In 1974, however, humanity did make a direct attempt at communicating with aliens by beaming an interstellar message out towards a globular cluster 25,000 light years away. The only problem is that for anyone to receive the message, they would have to be situated directly in the path of the beam. Not only that, but the message took less than 3 minutes to transit, meaning even if an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization was perfectly situated in the path, they would have had less than 3 minutes to detect the signal. While it seems unlikely, it is possible that in 1977 we got lucky enough to detect a beam coming from an advanced extraterrestrial civilization down to Earth. A momentary burst of energy known as the WOW signal swept across the planet, but we have not been able to figure out its origin or been able to detect it since we heard it the first time. In 2012, however, we did send back a response, but we have yet to hear back from whoever sent the wow signal. Perhaps, though, the reason we have yet to interact with intelligent life forms is because the universe has filtered them out, and one day it will filter us out too. Basically, what I'm saying is that humanity and all other life forms have an expiry date that is pre-wired into our experience and that prohibits us from ever reaching the point of extraterrestrial communications and other planetary colonizations. Why? I'm not sure, but I'm assuming it's to protect the universe somehow. I mean, let's think about it. Let's say right now is the perfect time for life to exist on Earth, and one day, long after we're gone, it will be the perfect time for life to exist on, say, Venus. If we had already found a way to migrate to Venus and subsequently developed it to our liking and then polluted it beyond repair, the life that was supposed to exist there after we had moved on to the next planet would have zero chance at survival. So maybe the expiration date encoded into each and every living being across the universe is to allow each and every being to have its moment in time to exist. Branching off of that theory, the Great Filter Theory, we have the self-destruction theory, which is similar but just a bit different because instead of the universe giving us an expiration date pre-coded into our existence, self-destruction theory states that life on every planet is destined to kill itself in order to protect the planet itself rather than the universe as a whole. Like I said, the theories are really similar, but one is a universal law and one is planetary preservation.
Number 10, UAP report. Alien fans and skeptics alike were pretty shocked when just a few months ago the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, said that they believed in aliens. Well, actually, they said they were going to be investigating unidentified flying objects, but close enough. While some people did believe that this was NASA saying, hey, we believe in aliens, it was actually them announcing they were going to launch a study into UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomenon, because I guess they're just too good to say UFO. The scientist coordinating the study said, over the decades, NASA has answered the call to tackle some of the most perplexing mysteries we know of, and this is no different. In the report, they said that a good chunk of confirmed unidentified objects seemed to show evidence that they were made using advanced technology that humans just don't have yet. Number 9, injuries. A Freedom of Information Act request caused 1,500 pages of UFO reports and evidence to be declassified and leaked to the public. And what the pages contained was pretty shocking for those who read it. A percentage of the pages included information of how people who reported seeing UFOs and aliens had been legitimately physically affected. Real physical evidence that something unexplained had happened to them. Some of the reports included things like burns, which could have been caused by the jets of a UFO or potential face-to-face alien interference. Bafflingly, they also confirmed that women who had come into contact with aliens shortly fell mysteriously pregnant after the event, with no explanation as to why they were suddenly with child. Yes, we all know by now how mommy and daddy make babies, but that apparently wasn't a factor in these cases. Alien babies potentially on the way. Number 8, FLIR. Alongside these 1,500 documents, 3 separate videos were released that appeared to show UFOs being spotted by the United States military, so let's take a look. The first is titled FLIR and was originally filmed back in 2004 when the USS Nimitz was flying off the coast of Southern California. There had apparently already been an unidentified aircraft in the area for up to a week before the video was filmed. Off the coast, they spotted a large oval-shaped object, estimating it to be about 40 feet long and white in color. 4 people on the craft saw the object for a running total of about 5 minutes, although the video is only just over a minute. They were able to track it using their advanced infrared camera, and due to the object's shape, they nicknamed it the Tic Tac. All these videos to this day have no real explanation for what the UFOs actually were. Number 7, gimbal. Next up on the list we have the video titled Gimbal, which was leaked alongside the last one I just talked about. This one's different because we can hear the people in the jet reacting to what they're seeing. They use a similar infrared camera and follow the object that was flying over the East Coast. At first, they comment that it might be some kind of drone, but then note that it is fighting against incredibly strong winds and appearing to not be affected by it at all. They even comment that there are other unidentified crafts in the area, but we don't actually see them as it's locked onto the target. What's interesting about this one, as the people in the video point out, is that it moves in an incredibly strange fashion, appearing to rotate and move around despite the heavy winds it's apparently fighting against. My favorite part of this is that there's one guy calmly stating facts about it while the other cusses and yells in excitement. Is that a f***ing drone, dude? Number 6. Go fast. The third and final leaked video is probably the best of the bunch, as the video starts before they have managed to lock onto the target and you can see it moving. The video is pretty correctly titled Go Fast because this thing is moving incredibly fast, like definitely faster than anything else that could have been an easy explanation. It's zipping over the top of the water as they try to get their camera to lock onto it, and when they finally do, they start cheering because of just how difficult it was due to how fast the object was moving. Their comments are a mix of excitement and confusion in regards to what they've managed to find, saying, "Look at that thing fly," while also going, "What the f is that thing?" People often like to write off UFOs as some sort of secret military practice vessels or training project, so what can it be when the military itself doesn't know what they saw?
A top secret exchange program between the United States government and planet Serpo, located in the Zeta Reticuli star system, aka the planet of the short grays. The project was allegedly created under the administration of President John F. Kennedy after the US government saved the life of an alien, EVA 1, who crash landed on Earth back in 1947. Entirely grateful and forever indebted to humanity, the alien began working with the US government and teaching them about his home planet, Serpo. When EVA 1 died, he left behind communications technology which the government then used to eventually get into contact with other Serpo natives. That is when the government made arrangements to send 12 specially trained astronauts to planet Serpo so that they may learn about life outside of our atmosphere. In order to reach Serpo, the 12 astronauts had to travel through a wormhole, after which the majority of them got sick and one unfortunately died of an aneurysm. But of course they kept going and eventually they reached the alien planet. For a decade they studied life on Serpo before returning home and assuming entirely new identities in order to protect the security of the mission. Fair enough, I suppose.
So what are the origins of this Project Serpo tale? Well, like with most conspiracies in the modern age, it started gaining popularity online and took off from there. It all started in 2005 when a series of anonymous emails began circulating among UFO researchers and enthusiasts. These emails, which were allegedly from a retired US government official who remained anonymous, laid out this insane story about an extraterrestrial exchange program. We'll talk more about this anonymous individual later. The Project Serpo story started making the rounds way faster than these types of stories would have back in the day. It was 2005, the internet was still relatively new, in the grand scheme of things anyway, and the UFO community was just hungry for new sensational stories. And this one, it's pretty much the definition of sensational.
Remember that alien that I mentioned, EVA 1, that crash landed to Earth in 1947? Yeah, well that was actually the Roswell Incident of 1947, and also the first time the US government supposedly made contact with aliens. As many of you are probably already aware, in 1947 an unidentified object crash landed on some farmland in Roswell, New Mexico. When Area 51 was alerted of the incident, they rushed to the scene, collected the object, and released a statement saying that what had come spiraling down to Earth a few nights prior was nothing more than a weather balloon. But then they sent the object out to another base for testing, and another, and another. Why? Well, because it wasn't actually a weather balloon. It was an alien spacecraft containing 6 aliens, 5 of which had died in the crash, and one of which came to be known as Extraterrestrial Biological Entity Number 1, or EVA 1. EVA 1 was taken to the Air Force facility in Los Alamos, where he stayed until his death in 1952. During this time, he learned to communicate with the military and told them some pretty interesting things.
Now, if the US government is really working with these alien beings, where might they be carrying out their activities? Area 51? Some hidden base in Antarctica? Well, some say they could be operating from an even more top secret place. Dulce Base. Dulce Base supposedly sits deep beneath the Colorado-New Mexico border, close to Dulce, New Mexico. Dulce Base is said to be a secret facility where humans and aliens are working together, exchanging ideas and doing all sorts of experiments, multiple levels deep underground with high-tech labs. The rumors are that different alien species, from the Greys, from planet Serpo possibly, to the reptilians, are working hand in hand with the US government. As to what they're trying to accomplish, probably something really fun and good that we don't really need to bother worrying about. Stories about this place really started coming about from a man named Paul Benowitz, who claimed to have discovered an underground base near Dulce full of gray aliens and humans. His claims caught a lot of attention, but Benowitz's mental health eventually declined, and he ended up in a mental hospital, passed away in 2003. And there's always been this rumor that he was part of a big, widespread misinformation campaign.
As I said, during EBA 1's time on Earth, he informed the US government of quite a few things. One being that Serpo natives, Ebans as they are referred to by humans, had actually been visiting Earth for the last 2,000 years with no issue, but unfortunately, this time new Earth radar technology that they don't have on Serpo caused the ship to go haywire and crash, killing the majority of the crew. In 1949, a similar thing happened. 6 Ebans crash landed, but this time unfortunately none of them made it. When the ship was examined, the military found a communications device, which they worked on with EBA 1 to repair. They got it working and sent out multiple distress signals, but it wasn't until after EBA 1's death in 1952 that they finally got a reply. Communications began between the US military and the Ebans. It took a while, but eventually they were able to understand one another. After learning about the 12 deceased Ebans stranded on Earth, the Ebans asked if they could come to Earth and retrieve the bodies. Of course, the military wanted something in return, so they came up with the exchange program. The military wanted tech, but the Ebans said, no, you're not ready for our tech. And so they proposed something else. In exchange for the bodies of their deceased, 12 astronauts could spend a decade on planet Serpo. Furthermore, an Eban would stay on Earth to assist the military. In 1964, the Ebans landed on Earth once again to retrieve the bodies, and Project Serpo, aka Project Crystal Night, as it has also been called, commenced.
What is Majestic 12? Well, if you're super into alien conspiracy stuff, you'll have seen them crop up all over the place. Said to be a top secret organization consisting of scientists, military leaders, and government officials who investigate alien spacecraft. Some even say they not only have direct contact with extraterrestrials, but work with them as well. Being given access to their technology, in exchange they cover up the aliens' presence on Earth while allowing them to study us. But that's a more outlandish version of the conspiracy. At the core though, they're said to at least have knowledge of aliens, and maybe even work on reverse engineering their technology, doing alien autopsies on extraterrestrials that have crash landed on Earth, that sort of thing. This is basically what Bob Lazar was claiming to have seen while working at Area 51. You could start to see how much Majestic 12, or MJ12 as they're often called, are really at the core of almost every United States government alien conspiracy. The JFK assassination is often described as the mother of all conspiracies, and yes, with just a little digging, you'll find that MJ12 is mentioned here too. Some people believe that Kennedy found out about MJ12 and the secret dealings they had with aliens. Supposedly, he wanted to reveal the truth to the American public, thinking they had a right to know. This of course didn't sit well with MJ12, who were determined to keep everything under wraps. On top of that, or maybe alternatively, depending on who you talk to, Kennedy was sticking his nose where MJ12 didn't want him to, trying to have the US and the Soviets work together, but this would mean sharing sensitive information with them about UFOs, and MJ12 didn't want that. One piece of evidence that fueled this theory is a document called the Burned Memo. This document surfaced in the 90s, and it's said to be a memo from an MJ12 member ordering someone to essentially terminate Kennedy, using coded language, of course. The memo mentions Lancer, which was Kennedy's Secret Service code name. Now, another part of the theory involves a speech Kennedy gave at the United Nations in 1963, where he talked about the need for cooperation between the US and the Soviet Union, even suggesting they should work together in space exploration. So some believe this was a veiled reference that he was making for his desire to share UFO secrets with the world. There's also a memo that Kennedy sent to the CIA asking for a review of UFO files. He wanted to be debriefed on the unknowns, as he referred to them as in the memo. And what's very eerie is that this memo was dated just 10 days before he was killed. So, did MJ12 see him as a threat to their secrecy and decided they needed to dispose of him? Now, how exactly did MJ12 get started? Well, for that, we gotta go all the way back to the Roswell Incident. Just how many dots are we gonna be connecting in this video? I told you, these guys are everywhere. So in July of 1947, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. The military first reported it as a flying disc, and this news spread like wildfire. But soon after, the story was changed. They claimed it was now just a weather balloon. So why this quick switch up? Was it really just a weather balloon, or was something else going on? Well, according to some, there was 100% something else going on. There are a lot of people who think the government was hiding something big. They suspected that the military had actually recovered an alien spacecraft and possibly even alien bodies from that crash site. This theory got stronger over the years as more people, including supposed whistleblowers, came forward with their own stories. MJ12 is said to have spawned out of this Roswell incident, a secret group created by President Harry Truman. Story goes that the group was formed to manage and cover up all information about UFOs and extraterrestrials, particularly what was found at Roswell, and apparently they've been operating in the shadows ever since. But when did the rumors about MJ12 begin? I mean, if they're so top secret, how did word about them start spreading in the first place? Well, the origins of the Majestic 12 conspiracy go back to the 80s. So in 1984, a UFO researcher named Jamie Shendere got an envelope in the mail with some film inside. When he developed the film, it apparently showed 8 pages of documents that looked like they were briefing papers for something called Operation Majestic 12. These papers described a secret group of 12 people, the names of scientists, military leaders, and government officials. More on them later. Then on May 31st, 1987, a British UFO researcher named Timothy Good claimed that he had documents from the 50s that revealed a secret committee called Majestic 12. And these documents apparently detailed everything I just outlined. This group was formed in 1947 by an order from President Harry S. Truman. The documents said the committee's job was to cover up the crash of the alien spacecraft at Roswell in July of 47. So figure out how to use the alien technology they found and decide how the US should deal with extraterrestrial life in the future. Who are some of the big names that were said to be in Majestic 12 though? Vannevar Bush was a key figure during World War II. He was a brilliant engineer and inventor, probably most famous for his work on the infamous Manhattan Project. He also helped create the National Science Foundation and was an advisor to President Roosevelt and President Truman. His name shows up in the MJ12 documents and was allegedly part of the organization. If MJ12 is real, Bush's inclusion would make sense. I mean, he worked on the Manhattan Project. If he was helping to build a nuclear bomb, why wouldn't he be involved in top secret UFO research? James Forrestal was the first US Secretary of Defense, appointed in 1947. Before that, he was a Secretary of the Navy. He was heavily involved in the early Cold War period, and he had access to some of the most classified information. He would have been a logical choice for a group like MJ12. On top of that, there's always been some mystery as to the exact circumstances of his death in 1949, which some think may have had something to do with his involvement in MJ12.
Starting off our list today, we have a 2018 UFO sighting that took place in the skies above North Carolina. Shout out to anyone watching from Elon University. In August of 2018, a man named Javion Hill claims to have spotted a UFO while driving home on US 74 just southwest of Charlotte. He described seeing lights in the clouds above him, shaped like a square. Immediately, he pulled out his phone and began snapping photos, which I have to admit are pretty convincing. After hovering in the sky above Javion for a good amount of time, the illuminated formation just vanished into thin air, as they do. You know how it is. It was as though it had never existed in the first place, but of course it did because there's proof, and we've seen it. And Hill, who says he was never a believer in aliens before that night, claims that during the time in which the object was hovering above him, he was seriously concerned for his safety.
On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, saw something in the sky near Mount Rainier in Washington, something that he couldn't quite explain. He described 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation. What really caught his attention was how fast these things were moving, at around 1700 miles per hour, which was faster than any known aircraft at the time. And when Arnold reported what he saw, it ended up getting massive media coverage. The Kenneth Arnold sighting is often referenced as the first big UFO encounter in modern times. After Arnold's sighting, lots of other reports started coming in about strange things in the sky across the United States. The government and military were getting intrigued, and the US Air Force started Project Sign, which was the first official government investigation into UFOs. This later became Project Blue Book, which looked into thousands of UFO sightings to try and figure out what was going on. So is it just one of these cases where he saw something and then everybody else started like getting excited and, just thought they were seeing things? Or was this just the time where UFOs and aliens were starting to come down to investigate things here on Earth?
Next up, we have two commercial pilots on different aircrafts claiming to have seen a mysterious flying object in the sky while flying above Arizona on February 24th of 2018. The first pilot to spot the UFO called into radio traffic control to ask if another plane had passed by him. The controller answered no, and then went on to make a joke about the pilot having possibly seen a UFO. Ground control then contacted another pilot flying an American Airlines flight a little bit behind the first plane and asked the pilot to inform the control center if an aircraft were to pass over the plane. And a short while later, the pilot did exactly that. He said that a fast object had flown 3,000 feet over his plane in the opposite direction of which he was going. Once again, ground control had no knowledge of the aircraft, and it didn't show up on any of the radars either. Both pilots later described the objects as illuminated and incredibly fast, saying that they were nothing like the weather balloons they had seen sometimes floating at that altitude before. Plus, there were no records of this object, so what could it have been? Well, a UFO, duh.
Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was the lead investigator of Project Blue Book in the 50s. His job was to investigate reports of UFOs and find any possible explanation for them. Of course, if there was none, it would be categorized as a genuine UFO. French had shot down a lot of UFO reports over the course of his career, but in 1952, he witnessed something himself, something he could only describe as a genuine alien encounter. He kept what he'd seen a secret for decades. It wasn't until 2013 that he testified before 6 former members of Congress in DC, describing an event that happened back in 1952. A number of residents off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, had reported spotting 2 unidentified flying objects. So French was tasked with heading over to Canada to basically debunk it. The UFOs had crashed into the water, and when Lieutenant Colonel French arrived, he saw this crowd of about 100 people, including some police, standing by a wharf, gawking at something in the water. French made his way over, and when he looked down into the clear water below, he saw what looked like 2 large circular aircraft-like objects, and there were apparently 2 beings working on them. French described the creatures as, quote, 2 to 3 feet tall, light gray in color, very thin, long arms with either 2 or 3 fingers, the top of their heads much wider than their jawline. Their eyes were very slanted, and you couldn't see pupils in them. He then described the objects slowly rising out from the water before abruptly accelerating and taking off into the sky. And we're going to start things off with Point Dume Underwater Base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. Looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above,
It's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking. And right here, for 2 miles, it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a dome stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site. Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have Hy-Brasil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen strange creatures and these glowing god-like beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included Hy-Brasil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the island's appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote in the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across 2 chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal Incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied. Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years, the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to Ancient Aliens. Thank you, Ancient Aliens. But apparently, there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades, which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945, when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into my car. One morning, I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin, wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog, about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them. Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently, as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disc passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15th, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface, pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be like digging through my backyard finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. How did he get that job? Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
Next up, we have the very first record of a UFO encounter to take place in New England, USA, which I bet you didn't know was actually a major hotspot for extraterrestrial UFO and UAP activity. That's unidentified aerial phenomena, for those of you who don't know. The first recorded sighting happened in Boston, New England, and it was also the first ever documented sighting in the US as a whole. It took place in 1639, and credible reports have been popping up ever since. The record was a second-hand observation recorded by colony founder and governor at the time, John Winthrop, who wrote that a sober, discreet man had seen the sky above Boston become illuminated by a green light while he was rowing his boat along the river one evening. The light was still for a moment and appeared to be flaming, and then it morphed its shape and darted off into the night sky towards Charlestown. The encounter lasted for 3 hours, with the object in the sky going higher into the air and then rushing down closer to Earth again and again, back and forth. By the time it ended, which it did when the object just disappeared into the night, the man along with his boatmates had traveled 1 mile upstream with absolutely no memory of how they had gotten there.
This next one has to be the wildest alien encounter case in recent history. So in March of 2023, something strange went down in a small Bolivian village called Horania. It all started with reports of a mysterious green light hovering in the sky. People whipped out their phones to capture the event, having no idea what the hell they were looking at. But unlike a lot of your typical UFO cases, this one doesn't just end with people seeing something strange in the sky. Things get way weirder. So 2 days later, residents claimed to have seen tiny beings darting around the town at night. One villager, Rita Marquez, described them as little and almost like goblins. Some locals even claimed to have found one of these small creatures dead in a gutter one morning, only for its body to vanish soon after. So, a lot to unpack here. Strange lights, possible aircraft, little beings running around the streets at night, and even a mysterious disappearance of one of these dead creatures. I don't know what to make of this case. Whenever there's a whole bunch of witnesses like this, I find it very interesting though.
Next up, we have Barney and Betty Hill's extraterrestrial encounter, which took place on September 19th of 1961 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where the couple claimed to have been abducted by aliens. The ordeal started when the pair saw a bright light in the sky around 10:30 p.m. while driving home after a night out. Betty asked Barney to stop the car so that they could get a better look. He did, and then pulled out a pair of binoculars. What they saw was a massive, oddly shaped spacecraft with multicolored lights. They tried to drive away, but the spaceship, which they believed to have been at least 40 feet long, followed them, getting closer and closer until it was hovering directly in front of the pair's car. Barney claims he was able to clearly make out 6 to 8 humanoid figures standing on the ship who instructed Barney and Betty not to move, but rather to just keep looking towards the ship. The next thing the pair remembered, they had driven 35 miles away from their destination with no recollection of doing so. They tried to write down as much as they could about the experience on their way home, but their memories quickly became fragmented. It wasn't until years later, under hypnosis, that the pair separately both recalled being taken onto the ship and then separated from one another and examined by the humanoid alien life forms. In the days after the incident, however, both Betty and Barney's watches stopped working, and Barney noticed tiny, circles on the back of his truck, and when he put his compass near them, it went haywire. So, I'm not saying they were telling the truth, but I think they might have been telling the truth.
This next story is very outlandish, but it's an entertaining story, and I haven't talked about it before, so here it goes. Back in 2021, Angelina Lynn Johnston held a news conference in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Johnston claims to be a former retired defense intelligence officer who had an encounter with various alien species at a secret base in the Mojave Desert. She claimed that in January of 2010, a few years before she ran as a Democrat candidate for South Dakota Senate, she had met up with a couple in South Carolina who ended up taking her to this secret base. She didn't provide details on exactly where the base was in the desert, but said that she would be taking an astronaut along with a few scientists to the base, which had been built into the side of a mountain. She described seeing various alien species, including one that looked a bit like a praying mantis type creature, and that the beings all spoke to her through telepathy.
Next up, we have the Exeter Incident, which took place in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1965 and actually inspired a best-selling novel, Incident at Exeter: Unidentified Flying Objects Over America Now, by John G. Fuller. Not sponsored. One evening in Exeter, a police officer patrolling Highway Route 101 stopped to check on a woman parked on the side of the road. When he asked her what was wrong, she answered in breathless hysterics. She claimed that a large red flying object with flashing lights had been chasing her. Just a few hours later, the police heard a similar story from another man, a hitchhiker who claimed to have seen 5 bright lights in the sky while walking along Route 150. He told officers that they had been about 100 feet away from where he had stood, and he watched as they hovered over a home before moving over to the airspace above a large field, and then disappearing and reappearing several times. Curious, one of the policemen went with the hitchhiker back to the spot where he claimed to have seen the UFOs, and sure enough, there it was. And another officer arrived shortly after to see the exact same thing: 5 bright lights high up in the sky disappearing into and reappearing from the trees over and over again. And then, over the next few weeks, authorities in Exeter received almost 60 other reports of UFO sightings in the area. So, if you like aliens and UFOs and Exeter was not on your bucket list, you might want to rethink that decision.
Finally, we have a case where 3 UFOs hijacked a pilot's plane in midair. This is about as disturbing a close encounter as it gets, as this man just narrowly escaped death. The pilot's name is Carlos de los Santos. In 1975, he'd been flying back to Mexico City. It was just another routine flight until it wasn't. Carlos spotted something on his right wing. It was this silver disc-like object about 13 feet in length. It was just right on top of the wing. Then he saw an identical object on top of his left wing.
And as if that wasn't enough, a third object appeared, and this one was heading straight for him. In a panic, Carlos tried to steer his plane away, but the controls weren't responding. Luckily, the object just missed him though. He frantically radioed air traffic control, explaining that he'd lost control and was surrounded by these strange disc objects. And then, to his complete and utter horror, the plane suddenly veered completely off course. It was now ascending higher and higher up into the sky. Carlos had absolutely no control over the plane now. But then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the strange objects flew away. And miraculously, thankfully, Carlos regained control of the aircraft. Roscoe H. Hillenkotter was the first director of the CIA, serving from 1947 to 1950. He later joined the board of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which is a civilian UFO research group. Makes sense why he'd be here. These are just a few of the names, of course. And now that we've dove into what this organization is, the history of it, who could have been involved, let's get into some of the criticism. We can't talk about Majestic 12 without mentioning the highly controversial Cutler-Twining memo. So I mentioned Jamie Chandere before, who'd received an envelope with photos of documents detailing MJ12. Well, just a year later in 1985, he and two other well-known UFOologists, Shanton T. Friedman and Bill Moore, had been on the hunt for declassified files in the National Archives when they apparently received a series of anonymous messages leading them to a very interesting document. The memo is a one-page document dated July 14, 1954. It was allegedly written by Robert Cutler, who was President Eisenhower's national security advisor, and addressed to General Nathan Twining. Twining was a high-ranking Air Force officer, which makes this memo a pretty big deal if it's real. The document briefly mentions MJ12 and talks about a meeting which some people think was related to UFOs and alien technology. People who believe in MJ12 and UFO cover-ups saw this as a major piece of proof that MJ12 was real and involved in hiding information about UFOs. Here's where it gets controversial though. There are several problems with this memo. First, there's no official record of a meeting on the date mentioned in the memo. Second, the style and format of the memo don't match the official documents from that time. Even the typeface used is apparently off. Another big issue is that Robert Cutler was actually out of the country on the date the memo was supposedly written. A lot of these arguments were brought forward by a UFO researcher and skeptic named Philip J. Klass and the FBI. But Klass was often labeled as a disinformation agent by conspiracy theorists. And again, even the FBI chimed in though. The FBI dug into the Cutler-Twining memo and other supposed MJ12 documents. They began their investigation in 1988 after receiving copies of these supposed documents. There were apparently discrepancies in the language and terminology that would have been used in a document like this. Another big issue was the content of the documents themselves. The FBI stated that the information seemed out of place. It seemed to be suspiciously tailored to fit the UFO conspiracy theories that were very popular in the 80s, rather than reflecting what would have been talked about at the time the documents were supposedly formed. It just seemed like someone had written them with modern UFO enthusiasts in mind, rather than being a genuine historical document. So in the end, the FBI declared the MJ12 documents to be falsified and wrote bogus on them with big bold letters. But did this really sway anyone who was highly skeptical of the government in the first place? Yeah, not really. And I mean, fair enough. It would make sense for an intelligence and security service organization like the FBI to cover up or downplay something like this. So, does MJ12 still exist? Did they ever exist at all? Well, they may or may not, but if the whole thing is fake, then how and why was this conspiracy concocted? Well, the first thought is that it's just UFO enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists looking too deeply into things and spotting things that aren't really there, but there's another possibility. I mentioned the UFO researcher Bill Moore earlier, who was one of the big names involved in the unearthing of these supposed MJ12 documents. Well, he actually started changing his tune about this whole thing. Moore thought that the government was covering something up. It just may have not been aliens, unfortunately. Instead, he thinks the whole thing was drummed up
by the United States government as part of a mass disinformation campaign. The purpose? To distract the public from top secret Air Force projects that were really going on. It makes sense. People would get so excited by the idea that the government was interacting with extraterrestrials that they'd be totally blind to the actual nefarious stuff the government was working on. But there's another aspect to this theory as well. What if the disinformation campaign was formed by the government in order to lessen people's interest in aliens and UFOs? What do I mean by this? Well, think about it. The government creates the documents, lets the public obsess over them, then discredits them to make the whole topic of UFOs look silly. Purpose of this? UFOs and aliens really are existing and they just don't want the public to be focusing on it. Hey, who knows? The star system where these aliens are supposedly from has been at the center of some of the most famous alien abduction stories in history, including the Barney and Betty Hill abduction. Were these beings from Serpo, Ebens, or Greys, as they're typically called, responsible for abductions like this? The Barney and Betty Hill case is pretty interesting. In September of 1961, this American couple was driving through rural New Hampshire at night when they noticed strange lights in the sky that seemed to be tracking their car's movements. Barney decided to stop the car to get out and have a look, and what he allegedly saw were humanoid figures peering out from a hovering craft. The Hills peeled off as fast as they could, but they later realized they'd lost a pretty hefty chunk of time that they just didn't remember. But as the days passed, they started to remember things. They ended up reporting being taken aboard a UFO where they were subjected to medical examinations by beings described as small, with gray skin, oversized eyes, and tiny little anime mouths, which is that's the exact way they described it back then. It's a 60s term, anime mouths. Their account was one of the earliest descriptions of the now iconic image of your classic gray alien.
Of course, a regular mission to space is no walk in the park, but a mission to a faraway planet located in a star system entirely separate from our own, that's tough. And apparently so was the training process. It took an entire year of survival, escape, evasions, weapons, and psychological training for the 12 astronauts to become fully prepared for their mission. The crew consisted of scientists, linguists, pilots, 2 doctors, and a security officer. Over the course of a year, along with the standard training, one by one, each member of the crew was buried in a 6 by 5 foot box and kept there for 5 days. As part of a training intensive, there was no light, no communication. Just a small air hole that allowed the astronauts to receive food and water and not suffocate to death. It was tough, but they all passed, and the pilots even went on to learn how to operate alien spacecrafts. When it came time to take off, the 12 astronauts, along with 40 tons of gear, which included 10 motorcycles and 3 jeeps, were loaded into the spacecraft using anti-gravity technology, and one even came along to assist in their journey. When the ship was all boarded, each astronaut went to their own individual pod and settled in for the long journey ahead.
All right, before we get to what they saw on that journey, let's have a little bit of fun here and talk about something that comes up more than you'd probably think when Project Serpo or just interactions between aliens and humans is discussed. Hybrids. Yeah, aliens creating human-alien hybrids, either through experimentation or, God forbid, actually getting it on. This kind of thing always feels like it's going down the same rabbit hole that creepy online fan fiction does, where it's like, I'm gonna write about my fantasy of Alf impregnating Willie Tanner. I don't know. I'm not trying to shame, live your lives, but the concept of humans and aliens breeding with each other always feels inherently silly to me. With that said though, this does often play into the Project Serpo conspiracy. Those astronauts were apparently on this planet for a while. Who knows who they met? One thing could have led to another. Plus, in all these reported UFO abduction cases, who knows what kind of nasty experiments those Greys could have been doing.
When the crew arrived at Serpo, the first thing they noticed was that it was barren, bright, and hot. Really hot. About 107 degrees Fahrenheit or 41 degrees Celsius. Quickly, they realized why. Planet Serpo had 2 suns, which are shown here in a photograph taken by one of the astronauts. Allegedly. One of the suns was orbited by Serpo, and the other was off in the distance. Because of this, the planet never got dark, and the days were 40 hours long, meaning that their decade-long mission was actually going to take 13 13 human years. In total, there are about 650,000 Ebens living on the planet in small, separate village communities and houses made of some kind of concrete rubber substance. It was a primitive life, but at the same time, the Ebens were equipped with electricity and incredibly advanced technology. Families generally consisted of a male and female Eben, and each family was allowed to have a maximum of 2 children, which were hidden away until they reached the age of maturity. During their time on Serpo, the astronauts gathered as much information about the Ebens as they could. And if you guys remember, I do believe I mentioned that one of the astronauts died on transit. Apparently the Ebens used that astronaut to clone and create hybrids of, like James mentioned, and it was then that the remaining astronauts realized that they weren't as peaceful as they once thought them to be. When it came time to return home, for some reason, 2 of the astronauts actually decided to stay, and then 2 more astronauts died on the way back to Earth. The surviving astronauts were given a large sum of money and an entirely new identity. That's great and all, but many of them were suffering from radiation poisoning due to the 2 suns and died soon after their return to Earth.
One of the most avid supporters of the Project Serpo conspiracy is a man named Richard Doty, who we can't really talk about Serpo without talking about this guy. See, Richard Doty has made some pretty outlandish claims, so outlandish that there's a whole other conspiracy that spawned around him and other government officials like him. Supposedly, Doty was the man behind those anonymous emails I talked about earlier. Richard Doty is a retired special agent who used to work for AFOSI, the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation. But a lot of people think he wasn't actually investigating UFOs, but that he was part of a team spreading misinformation intentionally, basically muddying the waters and leaking supposedly secret info about the government's exchange program with alien beings in order to confuse the public, making it hard for us to tell what's real or not. Of course, the purpose behind the misinformation is, of course, to distract everyone from the actual nefarious things the government is up to. I mean, who doesn't get excited about aliens, right? I'm sure we'd all rather believe that the worst thing the government is doing is working with extraterrestrials instead of them doing some shady stuff at our own expense. Could there be some genuine truth about the planet Serpo thing? I mean, sure, maybe, but you know, just something to keep in mind with stuff like this.
Number 5, Pentagon report. In May of this year, the Pentagon appeared on a panel where they discussed UFOs, and they revealed just how much information they have about the situation. They said that there are around 400 separate reports of unidentified flying objects coming from military personnel. So while we do have the 3 leaked videos, there are likely even more locked up in a safe somewhere that offer convincing evidence of the existence of aliens. The Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence said, "We've seen an increasing number of unauthorized and/or unidentified aircraft or objects, and military control training areas and training ranges and other designated airspace. Reports of sightings are frequent and continuous." Well, it definitely sounds like he's trying to sweep it under the rug as someone just like flying a drone illegally onto a military base or something. I think it's safe to say the military have the resources to know if it were something as simple as that. So their confusion and uncertainty makes it seem more and more like aliens are among us. Number 4, live stream. In 2016, an incident occurred during NASA's live feed from a camera mounted on the International Space Station that pointed towards the Earth. You can see the Earth's curve, and one viewer noticed that for a short moment, a massive bright object can be seen falling towards the planet. But as quickly as it comes, it's gone as the live feed conveniently cuts out and experiences technical difficulties. The video was posted to YouTube, and people immediately started theorizing that NASA had intentionally cut the live feed at this moment to cover up the fact that this bright shape was a UFO, or at least something alien in origin. Many people noted how suspicious this was and started calling out NASA for their actions, while other people were saying that it was just a meteor or some hunk of space junk. A spokesperson for NASA said that the cameras are controlled automatically, and it had simply passed out of range, causing the video to be cut off. But that's just what they want you to think. Number 3, alien junk. An astrophysicist from Harvard wrote a book that was titled Extraterrestrial: The First Sign of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth, and it was about how he believed that an object that passed through the solar system in 2017 was actually a piece of alien technology, bringing forward the theory that NASA is actually just ignoring real evidence of alien existence because they're just brushing it off as some random space junk. Whether they believe it really is space junk or they're just trying to make us think that that's what it is. The object was long and not shaped like any known comet we've ever seen before. It also apparently accelerated away from the sun, and he believes it ended up in our solar system accidentally thanks to aliens, saying, "A buoy, a grid of pods for communication, other intelligent living organisms, defunct technology, or discarded technological trash. These are all plausible explanations." Number 2. Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin was one of a handful of astronauts who were aboard the Apollo 11, the first spaceflight that put humans on the moon with one small step for man. During their journey, however, they saw more than just the moon. Apparently, they may have seen a UFO. They reported seeing large objects that appeared to follow alongside them. It was confirmed not to be the upper stage of the rocket that would have been detached, as this was 6,000 miles away from them at the time. The event was kept under wraps and nobody talked about it until it was brought up years later, sweeping it under the rug as simply a panel that had disconnected from the ship. But again, that's just what they want you to think. The claims coming from a senior NASA scientist who said he had just called up Buzz on the phone and he had agreed. Did you really talk to him on the phone, senior NASA scientist? Did you really? Number 1. ISS report. Alright, this one's not actually NASA because it actually comes from a Russian astronaut aboard the International Space Station, and I'm just gonna count it because it's a pretty cool video. He was on board the ISS using his camera to record the southern lights, which are the same as the northern lights but in the south. It's a time-lapse recording, and for a brief moment you can see a line of large bright lights moving across the sky. In the tweet the astronaut posted, he referred to them as space guests, saying that while it was only a few seconds in the time-lapse, it was actually around 52 seconds in real time. Some people suggest that it may have been some kind of meteor or satellite, but I'm actually a licensed professional and I say that it was aliens.
Destruction theory comes from the Medea hypothesis, which is based off Medea from Greek mythology, who killed her offspring. Basically, our planet is Medea and we are the offspring. The very thing that gave us life is destined to kill us as we take away its own life force. An example of this is the Ice Ages, which those who follow the self-destruction theory would blame on an excess of plants, which absorbed an excess amount of CO2, which led to extreme global cooling, greatly damaging the integrity of life on Earth. Now we've come in. We've killed off a bunch of plants, we've warmed the Earth up, but we warmed it up too much, and we've killed off a bunch of other living things. And this, once again, has greatly damaged the integrity of life on Earth, meaning that at some point in time before we are able to achieve an intelligence level that allows us to communicate and commute to these aliens, something is bound to come in and kill off humanity. Do you see what I'm saying? Another theory, however, states that Earth is actually the birthplace of all life, all aliens. It's the incubation theory that, to put it quite simply, states that Earth is an incubation ground for all life in our universe, and that once a civilization reaches a point of high enough intelligence, they leave to colonize other planets. If this is true, it makes sense why aliens who have gone through the same process wouldn't want to interfere with our own. This is our chance to prove to the rest of the universe that we are not the runts of the litter, but that we have the capabilities to evolve into a species that can branch out into the universe on our own. The same way people who make documentaries about nature aren't supposed to step in when a lion tries to eat a gazelle, there is an unspoken rule that prohibits aliens from interfering with our development until we have reached that final stage. And then of course there is zoo theory, which is similar to incubation theory in that aliens have decided not to interfere with our existence, but different in that zoo theory does not follow the notion that all life in the universe began and evolved on Earth. What's neat, or perhaps terrifying, about zoo theory is that it covers the idea that while we have not yet been able to observe extraterrestrial life forms ourselves, they have certainly been able to observe us, and they've been doing it for centuries. If this really is the case, I wonder if Earth is the entire zoo, or just one of many exhibits in a giant cosmic roadside attraction called the Milky Way. It's anyone's guess, really. Now, much like how in order to communicate with aliens via signal beam, we would have to send our communications to the exact right spot at the exact right time, the reason why we haven't seen aliens could just be a timing issue. It's entirely possible that aliens existed long before our current time. Maybe they were around for the beginning of humanity, and maybe they even visited Earth early on in order to aid with some architectural projects like the pyramids and Stonehenge, but now they're gone. Extinct, dunzo, we missed them, and they're not coming back. I feel like this theory makes a fair bit of sense when you consider the references made in ancient texts to godly humanoid figures that are now, for some reason, nowhere to be found. Perhaps extraterrestrial life forms knew they were dying out and stopped on Earth to keep their existence from becoming nothing but stardust. On the other hand, of course, perhaps we aren't late, but we're early. According to Abraham Leob of Harvard and Raphael Batista and David Solone of the University of Oxford, the chances of life on other planets is actually set to grow much higher in the distant future. I mean, life on Earth developed 30 million years after the Big Bang, and it's still in the early stages. So who's to say that in another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 million years, the galaxy won't be teeming with various intelligent life forms spread out across the cosmos? I mean, it makes sense, but so do the rest of these theories. Anyways, the likelihood of us being alone in this universe is slim, but the likelihood that we are lone intelligent beings in this universe because the rest of life is still in single-celled stage 1 is much more probable. The dark forest hypothesis is another possible reason for our lack of alien communication. Basically, the hypothesis states that the reason we have not yet crossed paths with any other life form is due to a drive towards self-preservation and a fear of being destroyed by another hostile, undetected civilization. I mean, to be fair, if I were part of a peaceful, albeit guarded, civilization making my way through the cosmos and I stumbled upon humanity, I would 100% be absolutely terrified. We're scary, there's no denying it, don't even try. And what if there is another civilization out there even scarier than us? I don't want us to be looking in the wrong cosmic corner one day and accidentally run into our doom. Like, you wouldn't go looking into the corners of a dark forest to figure out what's lurking there that could possibly kill you, so why are we doing it in our universe? Furthermore, it's likely that out of this sphere, extraterrestrial species are not only not looking for us, but also actively working against being found. But then again, on the other hand, maybe aliens don't exist and we really are alone, floating through the vastness of space, inching closer and closer to our impending doom that will one day come in the form of a massive quasar swallowing our galaxy whole. Next up, we have arguably the most beautiful alien assuming photograph I have ever seen. The photo was taken in 2004 by a retired Royal Air Force officer while on vacation in Sri Lanka. The site was described as some kind of colorful giant donut in the sky with hues of oranges, pinks, purples, and whites. After its capture, the photograph was turned into the Royal Air Force Flying Dales base in North Yorkshire in England, where it became a classified document held by the Ministry of Defense. The image has since been declassified, of course, and is now available for public viewing, but there is still a lot of mystery surrounding the photo as well as the photographer, as his identity, along with any other information regarding the incident, is pretty much non-existent. I mean, come on, it's a giant glowing light in the sky. You're really telling me no one else saw this and that there's no other information out there other than the fact that the photo exists? Oh yeah, and not only that, but it was deemed classified by the British Ministry of Defense, so I'm thinking there's something else going on here. Okay, I bet you didn't know that another major hotbed for extraterrestrial, UFO, and unidentified aerial phenomenon activity was Brazil. I mean, I did, but maybe you didn't. In fact, this kind of thing is so popular in Brazil that they have an annual day of recognition for these sightings known as the Night of the UFO, which came to be after a major event took place in 1986. On the night of May 19th, a series of unidentified flying objects were seen in the skies of Brazil, and even more non-visual objects were detected via radar across the skies of 4 Brazilian states. Of course, at this time, any and all knowledge the government had on the event was extremely classified. In May of 2012, however, Brazil's Freedom of Information Act went into place, after which the public demanded the release of all the documents relating to the incident. The government complied, and not only released written documents of the events, but also a series of photographs depicting strange activity within the skies above Brazil. Although the images of what appeared to be nothing more than squiggles and clouds of smoke didn't provide much clarity, a statement made by the Minister of Aeronautics did. He said, "This command is of the opinion that the phenomena are solid and reflect, in a certain way, intelligence, due to the ability to follow and maintain a distance from observers, as well as to fly information." After this statement was made, the Brazilian government has still not been able to confirm exactly what took place the day the night of the UFOs was born. Next, we have a photo taken in 1990 by 2 Scottish chefs who were working in a hotel near the area in which the photograph was taken. After a long day of work, it appears the 2 men had decided to take a hike in an attempt to blow off some steam. While this walk wouldn't end up being incredibly relaxing, it would be wildly exciting, as not long after the 2 men had set off on their journey along the Calvine Scottish countryside, they noticed something hovering above them in the sky. The object was not one that either of the men could identify, and so they pulled out their cameras in an attempt to document the 100-foot flying aircraft instead. The photos, which have been analyzed and show no signs of manipulation, capture the object being circled by a jet plane. They thought the incident was incredibly strange and even newsworthy, so the 2 turned the footage over to the local newspaper for publication, but the images were seized by the British Ministry of Defence and were never released. Until 32 years later, that is, by David Clark, who, unbeknownst to the ministry, had kept a photocopy of one of the original images. The identity of the 2 men was never revealed, nor did they ever come forward to share their story after the images had been seized by the ministry, begging the question of what exactly they saw and what exactly the government was trying to cover up. A photograph taken of an unidentified aircraft lit up by military spotlights in Los Angeles, California, is next on the list. The photograph, which documents an event so big it later became referred to as the Battle of Los Angeles or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, was taken on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. On the night the photo was taken, all of Los Angeles was under blackout, as directed by the US military. While the lights on the ground had been turned off, the sky above had been lit up by a myriad of strange objects. The military opened fire, and onlookers stood absolutely stunned as 1,400 rounds of ammunition appeared to have no effect on the unidentified flying object. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found in the sky or on the ground. Shrapnel that appeared to have ricocheted off the target resulted in the death of 5 civilians. Furthermore, 3 were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more of heart attacks due to the stress of the 2-hour-long attack. And finally, we have a handful of screen grabs from a video taken by Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich whilst flying an 18F Super Hornet fighter jet over the Pacific Ocean near San Diego during a training mission for the United States Navy. The footage, taken in November of 2004, was captured after Dietrich was asked to investigate a suspicious object that had been seen dropping from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean and then vanishing. When Alex and their colleague arrived on the scene, the ocean's surface, where the object had been reported, appeared as though it was boiling. Moments after arriving to investigate, a strange, elongated white object came into view and was captured on video hovering above the water before it disappeared into the sky at an impossible speed, leaving no wake in the oceans below. While the footage has been confirmed to be authentic by the United States Department of Defense, the object itself, along with its origins, remains a mystery.
There are also witnesses aside from Brazil's claiming to have seen some strange things. So many of these witnesses stayed silent for years, but eventually began speaking out to close friends or family about what they'd seen, still fearing repercussions from the government. There was another crash site about 40 miles from Brazil's ranch where more wreckage and alien bodies were said to be being recovered. A firefighter who went to this site claimed that he saw a large disc in the ground and several small, non-human bodies nearby. He said that military officials told him to keep quiet. about what he saw. Sergeant Melvin Brown also shared his experience. He said he rode in a truck with the bodies from the crash site to Roswell Field and then stood guard at the hangar where they were first kept. He was instructed not to look under a tarp, but he got curious and he peeked. He claimed he saw 2 alien bodies. The government has always denied his claims, but several people who were there or knew people who were there have said they saw wreckage and bodies arrive at Wright Field. Retired General Arthur Exon stated that a top secret committee was set up to oversee the investigation of this and other classified UFO incidents. After the Roswell crash, the debris was secretly flown from Fort Worth, Texas to Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. At Wright Field, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Exon, who later became the base commander, recalled that some of the material was very thin, but incredibly strong. And it wasn't just metal that arrived at Wright Field either. At the second crash site a few miles from the first, they discovered a smaller, more intact craft and 4 bodies lying nearby. These bodies did not look human. Again, according to witnesses, the bodies were described as being in fairly good condition despite having been exposed for 6 days. Some parts of the bodies have been chewed on by animals. Descriptions from those who saw the bodies are pretty consistent. They were said to be 4 to 5 feet tall, with big heads, large eyes, and small mouths. Basically your classic idea of an alien. They had thin bodies with long arms and 4 fingers. An army nurse who worked on the initial autopsy described how fragile the skulls and bones were too. The bodies were quickly placed in large, sealed wooden crates, loaded onto a B-29 bomber and flown to Fort Worth before being sent to Wright Field.
Now, the general public weren't the only ones concerned with the Roswell crash. In fact, one of the highest members of government was too, the president, which at the time was Harry S. Truman. After the incident took place, Truman became increasingly interested and concerned with UFOs, so much so that in 1948 he called a meeting with his military aide, Colonel Robert Laundrie, in the Oval Office to discuss UFO reports and what they might mean for the security of the country. Laundrie told Truman that, quote, all manner of objects and things were being seen in the sky by people as of late, which only led the president to worry more about the possibility of new, never-before-seen threats to the American people. And so Truman ordered a quarterly oral report from both Laundrie and the Air Force to be presented to him at the White House to discuss whether or not the UFO sightings would present any kind of immediate danger. Although neither the military or the Air Force were ever able or willing to provide Truman with any answers, the UFO sightings kept coming, and officials became more and more confused. To this day, it's unclear what information the government has gathered on UFOs, but what we do know is that if they do in fact have concrete evidence supporting the existence of alien life forms, they sure as heck aren't sharing it with us. Yet, fingers crossed.
The Roswell incident was the catalyst for pretty much every modern UFO conspiracy today. Before Roswell, the idea of aliens was just that, really, an idea. But when stories about this mysterious crash hit the papers, it really changed the public's view of the possibility of alien life forever. Suddenly, what people had read about in science fiction and fantasy novels or watched on the big screen was something a lot more concrete. Project Blue Book formed a few years after the Roswell incident, a genuine Air Force program dedicated to investigating UFOs, at least in the early days. Area 51, the mysterious Men in Black, Majestic 12, all of these things started being whispered about in the years following the Roswell incident.
Sumerian triumph tapestry, which appears to not only depict the succession of various rulers to the throne, but also the presence of UFOs hovering above the Sumerian people, is next on our list today. The tapestry was created in the capital of West Flanders province in the Flemish region of Belgium around 1538, and since then it has been the subject of many conspiracy theories, which makes sense considering the 2 alien spaceship-looking objects depicted in the top left corner of the piece. Now, if you know anything about the Sumerian people or the Anunnaki, you are likely well aware that even without the presence of the Triumph Tapestry, the Sumerians are a pretty good argument for the legitimacy of aliens having had a pretty prominent presence on Earth in the past. Adding the tapestry into the mix is really just the cherry on top of the extraterrestrial cake, because it confirms confirms how the Anunnaki, the ultra-intelligent alien species that ordered the creation of the pyramids, arrived on Earth in the first place. If you don't know anything about the Sumerians, ancient Sumeria, and the Anunnaki, but would like to, I do have a video on them titled Ancient Sumerian Mysteries That May Never Be Explained that you can watch after this.
Next, we have the Casso artifact, known as one of the world's out-of-place artifacts. It was discovered in 1961 near Olancha, California. While out looking for geodes, these rock collectors found a strange rock that seemed out of place, and when they cut it open, they were surprised to find it actually had a metal core inside. The outer layer of the rock was encrusted with a hard substance, while the inner metal core was a cylindrical object that looked almost like a spark plug. This was not what anyone had been expecting to find because the rock seemed to be millions of years old, far older than the age of modern machinery. So it sparked, see what I did there? It sparked a lot of curiosity. Some researchers think this is just a naturally occurring geode that somehow formed around a modern spark plug, but what if it's not the case? What if it's a piece of ancient technology left by an advanced civilization? Or even more interesting, an object that some extraterrestrial beings left behind a long, long time ago.
I'm sure by now we've all heard the theories that the pyramids were built by aliens, which is a fair assumption considering the fact that historians have been consistently unable to come up with an explanation as to how the construction of the pyramids would have been possible in ancient times. But what about other massive artifacts like Stonehenge, or perhaps the massive stone head that was found in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle in the 1930s? The statue dates back to before the Spanish Revolution, so prior to the Mayan and Aztec empires falling to the Spanish armies, which is strange considering 1, there is little to no way the Mayans living in the area could have sculpted the stone head and placed it in the area, and 2, if somehow they did, why doesn't it look like them? The statue's features do not mimic those of the ancient Mayans or Aztecs. Because of this, it is believed that the features once displayed on the head, which have since worn down due to revolutionary troops using the historic artifact as target practice, were actually the features of an ancient alien civilization that was far more intelligent than humanity, and that likely had a hand in the construction of the Mayan and perhaps even the Aztec empires as well.
This next one is actually 100% known to be from space. Back in June of last year, Harvard professor and theoretical astrophysicist Avi Loeb led an excavation to Papua New Guinea to uncover the remnants of a meteor that had crashed into the Pacific Ocean, and what they found were small spherical space rocks from deep in space, and there's still a question as to whether the object they came from was naturally occurring or not. What they do know is that the small spheres are made up of elements we don't have here on Earth. Loeb wrote, quote, "This is a historic discovery because it represents the first time that humans put their hands on materials from a large object that arrived to Earth from outside the solar system."
Finally, we have an incredibly mysterious extraterrestrial object discovered by the Betts family in 1974. That year, a mysterious fire had broken out on the family's property that destroyed 88 acres of woodland. When the Bettses went out to explore the area and search for the cause of the mysterious fire, they stumbled across a metal sphere with a diameter of just 8 inches and a weight of almost 20 pounds. At first, the family thought that the object might have belonged to the Soviet Union or perhaps NASA. They thought about leaving it where they found it, but curiosity got the better of them, and so they decided to take it home. About 2 weeks later, the family's son was playing guitar while sitting next to the strange spherical object when all of a sudden it began to emit a strange resonating sound that caused the family dog to act up. A while later, the family discovered that when they pushed the sphere across the floor away from themselves, it would change direction and return to the person who had pushed it. Not only that, but the object avoided being damaged at all costs, rolling up slanted tables to keep itself from crashing on the floor, and eventually it began emitting pulsing sounds seemingly out of nowhere. The strange behavior was witnessed by scientists as well as representatives from the military, so you don't just have to take the Betts family's word for it. At first, the Betts family refused to let the ball out of their possession, but after doors started slamming shut and music began randomly playing in their home, they handed it over to the authorities, who were shocked to discover that the metal ball was just that, a metal ball, or so it appeared. Well, there is no solid explanation as to why the sphere displayed such strange properties and caused so many strange things to happen. I think we can all agree that the most likely reason is because it came from outer space with a purpose that has yet to reveal itself to mankind.
For 5 spot today, we have the Voynich manuscript. In 1912, an antique bookseller somehow stumbled upon the Voynich manuscript. This is a book that is 250 pages long, and while it shows some images of different things, it is also completely written in an unknown alphabet. The book is said to be from around 600 years ago, but why have we never seen this alphabet at all before? Aliens? A researcher by the name of Stephen Bax has apparently been able to decipher 14 of the characters in the book, but do you really know for sure? It is said that while this book may have been written in some unknown language, it may also possibly be code for something that is yet to be cracked. While I truly have no idea what secrets this book holds, I do hope it's nothing of importance to us now. Or maybe the aliens are just trying to make contact. Write in English, please. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Atacama Giant. This massive geoglyph is located in the Atacama Desert of Chile. Looks like an alien doodle. I love this little guy. It is a large human-like figure measuring 86 meters in height, and it is believed to have been created by the pre-Columbian peoples who inhabited the area over 1,000 years ago. The figure's arms are raised and its body is decorated with symbols and designs that are thought to have been religious or have astronomical significance. Imagine finding this one day hundreds of years ago. It would be absolutely jarring. The purpose of the geoglyph remains a mystery. Who were they trying to communicate with in the skies? The geoglyph is speculated to have been used for astronomical observation or as a spiritual symbol. Today, the Atacama Giant is considered an important archaeological site and a cultural landmark in the region. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Northern Kazakhstan geoglyphs. This is a package deal, more than one symbol in this one. Massive, mysterious geoglyphs were found in the remote regions of northern Kazakhstan. These geoglyphs consisted of various shapes and symbols, including circles, squares, lines, some of which stretch for several kilometers across the landscape. Our last one was one symbol, one little guy. This one here is much larger. The origin and purpose of these geoglyphs of course remain unknown, but they are believed to have been created by the ancient nomadic tribes who inhabited the region over 2,000 years ago. Some experts speculate that the geoglyphs may have been used for religious or ceremonial purposes, while others believe that they may have served as navigational aids. Or, if you're clicking this video, maybe they were communicating with higher beings. Maybe it was aliens, I'm just saying, alright? Today, the Northern Kazakhstan geoglyphs are considered a very important archaeological site. In our number 2 spot today, we have the stone circles. The Middle Eastern stone circles are a collection of ancient structures consisting of standing stones. You guessed it, all forming circles. They're found in various parts of the Middle East. Again, an incredible amount of work was required to coordinate these geoglyphs. The stone circles are over 5,000 years old and were likely used for religious or astronomical purposes. Researchers have agreed that there must have been some sort of leader or head architect involved in order to make these circles happen. Maybe an alien architect. He's just laying out floor plans for this lovely new planet he found. Experts believe that they could have been used to herd wild animals, or the stone circles could have been used in ceremony after death. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Sajama lines. The Sajama lines were rediscovered in the 1930s in the Sajama National Park in Bolivia. It's a massive network of straight lines and geometric shapes stretching over 20 kilometers over the surrounding landscape. What creeps me out the most is that this looks like another planet. This looks like a crater with lines shooting out of it, almost like an ancient alien highway. Maybe I'm crazy, but we're here at number 1 after all. Some experts believe that the Sajama lines were used for astronomical observation as they are aligned with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. That's both impressive, but also terrifying. Okay?
5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom. On October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO Incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and dropped below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright-Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit the ground, and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now, the majority of these reports come from northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now, if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio?
Today we have the North Yorkshire, England event, which took place in 1952. Reports of a bright silver disc-shaped object the size of a large bus hovering in the sky began began spreading across the country. The aircraft was witnessed by people from many different towns, as well as Royal Air Force pilots. In the days that followed, more similar objects were spotted in the skies above the county. People described the aircrafts as being even larger than the one in the first sighting, and described their maneuvers as being impossible for any known aircraft at the time. The events went on for many days and had hundreds of witnesses. Some even used radar technology to track the unknown craft, but no one was able to figure out its origin. Speculation of the UFO being an alien spaceship quickly took off, with others believing that the spherical ships belonged to the government and that they had been deployed into the sky for some kind of super secret military operation. Well, here's the thing. The event took place over 70 years ago, and the government has yet to fess up to the ships being theirs, which at this point you'd think they would have done, right? I mean, to be fair, if they did fess up by now, I probably still wouldn't believe them, but I want to know what you guys think. Alien spacecraft or yet another government cover-up story?
Next up is the Cash Landrum Incident. On the evening of December 29th, 1980, Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's grandson Colby Landrum were driving home to Dayton, Texas after dining out when they encountered a mysterious diamond-shaped object emitting flames and intense heat. It was floating above the trees. At first, Landrum, thinking it was a sign of the second coming, told Cash to stop the car. Cash considered turning back, but the road was too narrow. The object was described as intensely bright, with small blue lights descending toward the road, emitting flames periodically. Cash and Landrum had gotten out of the car to look at the object, but got back in when the heat became more and more intense. It got so bad that it burned Cash's hand when she touched the car. Landrum even left a handprint on the dashboard. Then the object started ascending again, and after it was back up in the air, a group of military helicopters surrounded it. So after making it back home that night, the three started feeling off, reporting symptoms like nausea and skin burns after the encounter, with Cash experiencing severe health issues, including large blisters and clumps of her hair falling out. Vicki developed a cataract, and Betty was diagnosed with cancer later on. Symptoms resembling radiation exposure, really looks like. The two went on to seek legal action, suing the US government for $20 million, but the case ended up being dismissed.
Alright, next on our list we have the Gorman Incident. In October of 1948, Second Lieutenant George F. Gorman was flying a P-15 Mustang aircraft during a training flight. Everything seemed to be going pretty routine until he noticed a strange object in the sky. At first he assumed it to be some type of weather balloon or other kind of experimental aircraft, but as he flew closer to the object to get a better observation, he realized it was something entirely different. He described it as some kind of pulsating, glowing ball of light. He tried to fly away from it, but to his surprise, the object began to follow him. Gorman tried to outmaneuver the unidentifiable flying object, but he was unsuccessful. He claimed that it appeared as though the UFO could anticipate his moves before they even happened. After a while, Gorman began to get seriously freaked out, and in a final attempt to lose this strange glowing ball, he decided the best plan of action was a nosedive. He dove the plane directly towards the ground, and after a 27-minute chase, he was able to lose the object. He leveled out his plane and lived to tell the tale. But no one, including Gorman, knows exactly what was seen in the sky that day. But what's even crazier is that after the incident, his plane tested positive for radioactivity. No one knows why. That's so wild.
Next on the list is the Alderney UFO sighting. On April 23, 2007, pilot Ray Boyer and his passengers observed a strange light while flying near Alderney. At first he thought it was reflected light, but soon realized that it was an object, estimating its size to be about a mile wide. He described it as bright yellow gold with black bands on the side. He also spotted a second object, similar but further away. Boyer reported the sighting to authorities, labeling it a near miss. Now, despite his report, the British Ministry of Defense didn't carry out an investigation, stating it occurred in French airspace. Witnesses on Boyer's aircraft and another pilot from Blue Islands confirmed seeing similar objects. One described it as sunlight colored and another as an elongated oval.
Next up, we have a UFO sighting at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. The incident took place at 4:15 p.m. on November 7th of 2006, so it's actually pretty recent. 12 different airport employees reported seeing a large saucer-shaped, unidentified flying object hovering over one of the airport gates, gate C-17 to be exact. And it was actually hovering above another aircraft that had been set to depart O'Hare but was delayed because there was a giant flying saucer hovering above it. Duh. The pilots in the plane, along with mechanics on the ground and airline management, reported to have seen the object. But air traffic controllers, however, did not see it because for some reason the craft above the plane was not picked up on their radars. The UFO was visible for several minutes before it suddenly disappeared. And even though the incident had many credible witnesses and was later investigated by the Federal Aviation Administration, no explanation was ever given regarding the events of the day.
Alright, the Travis Walton case. So this story has it all. A UFO sighting corroborated by multiple witnesses and a supposed encounter with alien beings. So it was November 5th, 1975. Travis Walton and his fellow loggers had finished up their day in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona. They loaded onto their truck and began the drive back home. They hadn't gotten far though when they noticed odd lights hovering above some trees. They decided to drive closer to see what was going on, and that's when they saw a massive unidentified object. Travis got out of the truck to see what the thing was, and then was suddenly lifted into the air by a beam of light. The rest of his friends drove out of there in a panic, but knew they couldn't leave him there. By the time they returned to the scene though, Travis was gone, and he would be missing for days. 5 days after disappearing, Travis Walton showed up again though. He placed a call to his sister's place from a phone booth outside of town. He was found disoriented and disturbed and began telling this horrifying story about how he'd woken up in a hospital-like room where two bald, alien-like entities were looking down at him. He tried to fight the creatures off before a human being wearing a helmet led him to another room where 3 other humans put a plastic mask over his face. He then lost consciousness again before waking up by the side of the highway.
And to finish off our list today, we have the possible involvement of a UFO in the disappearance of an F-89C Scorpion jet fighter. The aircraft had been used in a training mission over Lake Superior in Michigan in 1953. It had left from the Kincheol Air Force Base, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, with 2 incredibly experienced pilots at its controls. As it tends to, everything was going smoothly until it wasn't. All of a sudden, the plane had disappeared from the tracking radars on the ground, and it was replaced by something else, an object that was moving around erratically and rapidly. Ground operators were unable to identify what it might be, but knew that it couldn't possibly be the missing aircraft due to its movements. Eventually, that object also vanished from the radar. An investigation was conducted on the disappearance of the jet fighter as well as the pilots on board, as well as the origin of the second radar detection. But it should come as a shock to none of you that the investigation revealed absolutely nothing. But officials did say that based on the pilot's level of expertise and the relatively easy nature of the flight, it's highly unlikely that their disappearance was an accident. But what do you guys think?
5 is the interstellar broken telephone. Scientists recently sent a signal out to space aiming to chat with potential extraterrestrial pals. They even made a list of stars likely to get the message within the next 100 years. And guess what? They're hoping to hear it back by 2029. These smart folks did some big math to figure out how far their messages will travel and when any replies might show up if they do. They shared their cool calculations in a science journal called Publications of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. But the tricky part is that when we send these kind of radio signals out to space, they get weaker and harder to catch as they zoom along. So to make sure our messages have more oomph, scientists used NASA's super-powered deep space network. Some earlier attempts at this space chatting happened in the past, as back in 2002, we pinged a dead star about 27 light years away. And in the 80s, we messaged 2 stars expecting a reply by 2030. But not everybody thinks that this is a good idea. Some scientists worry that if aliens respond, we might not even notice. We only spread about one millionth of the Milky Way with our signals. That's like trying to yell in a cosmic empty stadium. And number 4 is the beacon in the galaxy. We've been trying to talk to potential aliens for a while now. It's like sending a message in bottomless space. The first attempt was in 1974 with the Arecibo message. Fast forward to now, and scientists are still at it trying to figure out the best way to say hi to whoever might be out there. This new message, called the beacon in the galaxy, is like a crash course in everything that humans know. Math, chemistry, bio, you name it. But the tricky part is reminiscent of the golden record from earlier. How do you write a message that an alien can understand? We can't use our languages or even numbers or symbols because, let's face it, aliens aren't gonna know our ABCs or 1, 2, 3s. So we use a kind of code, like a computer language called binary. It's like all ones and zeros, kind of like how computers talk. But even some really smart people on Earth had trouble decoding this binary message. Imagine aliens trying to figure it out. They might not even know what binary is. These messages also have drawings and diagrams about us and our place in the universe, but aliens might not be able to even see things the way we do, so even if they do get our message, they might not understand what we're trying to show them. And number 3 is the Arecibo message. This message was humanity's very first big attempt to send a message to aliens. It's basically a letter hoping aliens would find it. This all went down in 74 when scientists sent a super strong signal into space from Puerto Rico. It was like a big hello to any possible aliens in a star cluster called M13, super far away from us, about 21,000 light years far. The message they sent was pretty simple. It had patterns and information about us, Earth, our solar system, but again, it was in binary made of 1s and 0s. Now, it's unlikely we will ever get a response to this message in particular, but hey, at least we tried. At number 2 is the WOW signal. Wow. In 1977, a radio signal called the WOW signal made scientists go, wow. It was caught by a telescope at Ohio State University and lasted for 72 seconds. But after that, it disappeared, never to be heard again. The astronomer who discovered it was so amazed, he circled the signal on the datasheet and wrote wow next to it, and hence its name. Now, the signal didn't come with a message or anything. It was just a strong burst of radio waves. Scientists have been trying to find its source for ages. One idea might be it comes from a star in the Sagittarius constellation, but experts say we can't jump to conclusions. And at number 1 is interspecies communication. What do whale experts and alien hunters have in common? A lot more than you'd think, actually. This group of scientists got together and worked with their goal being to chat with whales. They did this experiment with a humpback whale named Twain. It wasn't like a full-on chat about life in the ocean, but it was still amazing. They used a special whale sound, kind of like a hello, to see if whales would reply. And then Twain showed up. For about 20 minutes, they kept making the sound, and Twain responded each time. Now, what's cool is that she even matched the gaps between their sounds. Like if they waited 10 seconds, she waited 2 before replying. It's a real conversation. Why is this important? Well, scientists think if we can understand how animals talk to us, we might be able to figure out how aliens could communicate with us as well. Imagine if whales taught us how to chat with extraterrestrials. It's pretty cool.
Coming in at number 5, Wandjina. For a long time, a lot of indigenous culture was passed down orally through stories. One of these such stories from Australian Aboriginal mythology talks about spirits named the Wandjina, and as they tell it, the Wandjina came down from the sky and created the earth as well as all of its inhabitants. Then, when the spirit found the place they would die, they painted their image on cave walls and entered a nearby watering hole. These paintings were then refreshed by indigenous people as a method of generating their life force. But what is intriguing about this tale in particular is that these spirits are depicted all over in the form of ancient rock paintings and appear to date back about 4,000 years. Plus, around the heads of the Wandjina are lines or blocks of color seemingly depicting lightning coming out of their helmets, which I mean is definitely a little suspicious. And many believers have been quick to point out the acute resemblance to the description of greys given by alleged alien abductees. If you don't know, greys are pretty much the classic depiction of an alien and are thought to be one of the extraterrestrial races, with UFOologists claiming they make up about 40% of reported abductions and sightings in the US. But could greys have come down, created life on Earth, and then disappeared into the night? I mean, maybe. Who knows? Coming in at number 4, a flaming shield. Similarly to the Roman historical report, other cultures too recorded significant happenings, and the Annales Lauricenses Maiores, which recorded much of history between 680 AD and 829 AD in what is now modern-day Germany, is definitely filled with some mysterious and interesting stories. One tale in particular took place during the time where battalions of Saxon soldiers were attacking, and it details as the attack progressed, suddenly a bizarre object appeared in the skies overhead. The potential UFO was described as the likeness of two large flaming shields, reddish in color and appearing as though it was floating in the skies above them. Apparently the object was so frightening that the advancing Saxon army abandoned the fight and retreated back to safety, something that would have been incredibly unusual for them. Now, the only hole to poke in this is that the author is unknown, but it is widely accepted that writers of the time would record events as they happened and that these stories would be compiled at a later date into the finished work. So just because we don't know who wrote it doesn't mean we don't know for sure it didn't happen. Coming in at number 3, lizard people. One of the wildest conspiracies out there is the belief that there is a race of half human, half lizard people that are taking over the world. Now, I will admit, this one is a little trickier for me to get behind for several reasons. However, after finding out about this piece of the puzzle, I am definitely a little curious. Although the conspiracy wasn't popularized until the 1990s, in the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologist Harry Reginald Hall made an unsettling discovery that definitely brought up a lot of questions. The archaeological site in question is referred to as Tal al-Ubaid and has served as a gold mine for ancient artifacts. However, by far, the strangest uncovered artifacts have to be the multiple series of lizard humanoid statues found by Harry in 1919. From what archaeologists can deduce, they don't appear to represent gods as they aren't depicted in ceremonious poses, and so it has led many to believe they could be early depictions of the race of lizard people. I mean, I won't lie, these little statues are super creepy and maybe one of the only times the lizard people theory has got me feeling a little suspicious. I don't know, do you think these figurines really could be proof of the evil lizard race invading the planet? Coming in at number 2, an alien mummy? Mummies are everywhere in Egypt, so while they are definitely interesting, they rarely cause any kind of huge excitement in the archaeological community, unless it's a particularly special one. Well, as I'm sure you've put together at this point, a few years ago, Dr. Victor Lubeck, who was a retired professor from the University of Pennsylvania, uncovered a strange mummy that made him question what he was seeing. Discovered in a small pyramid near Senusret II's pyramid was the mummy of a small, unidentified creature with seemingly no resemblance to that of a human body or known animal. To make things even more strange, buried along with the humanoid mummy were unusual objects Victor was unable to identify. What was clear was that whatever this was mummified with great respect and care, and an inscription was found on the tomb that roughly translates to star or sent from heaven. The running conspiracy theory is that it was an alien who was involved in some way with advising the pharaoh Senusret II, which would explain his royal treatment and careful mummification. I mean, it's definitely unsettling and absolutely an unusual find, but is it an alien? I mean, I guess it could be. And last up today on our number 1 spot, the Sumerian civilization. The ancient Sumerians were a group of people that suddenly became established in Mesopotamia circa 2900 BCE. No one is quite sure where they came from originally, but there is a general conspiracy that is well documented that their origins were not from planet Earth. According to a series of ancient texts, the Sumerians were created by an alien race called the Anunnaki, who came to Earth after their planet Nibiru collided with another planet in the solar system. The aliens found themselves in a short supply of gold and saw that Earth was in high supply, so they landed here and supposedly created a new species that was half alien, half human to mine the gold for them. Now, it does sound a little crazy, but the Sumerians did have advanced scientific, agricultural, and technological knowledge, as well as an acute understanding of the solar system, which was highly advanced at their time. Researchers have recorded clay pot batteries that still contained electrodes, a flyable model airplane, as well as an unexplainable capability to cut large stones with exact precision. Not to mention, similarly to the Egyptians, Sumerians seemed familiar and depicted drawings of rockets, boats, airplanes, and helicopters on certain artifacts from their time too. And if that didn't make you even just a bit curious, they have also discovered mitochondrial DNA evidence linked to a woman in Africa dating more than 100,000 years ago near a gold mine. While of course we might never know for sure, the legend of the Anunnaki has made even some of the biggest skeptics question the reality of aliens. And at number 5, the Tomb of Pakal. Ruler of the Mayan city in Palenque, the Tomb of Pakal is considered one of the most important archaeological discoveries. The tomb itself was found in the Temple of Inscriptions, but it's the story that appears to be dictated on the lid of the tomb that has captured the attention of ufologists across the globe. Said to communicate how Pakal's soul is going to make its way back to the stars from where he originally came. To undertake this journey, it's said he will use the monster of the sun, or what some nowadays might call a spaceship. Now, if you look at how Pakal is seated, it is strangely similar to how an astronaut sits while preparing for takeoff. And if you look closely, it does appear that there is something attached to his nose. Some say that it could be an air supply of some sort, plus at the bottom of the alleged aircraft, some argue that the waves appear to be fire and smoke, just like a modern day rocket. I mean, there are definitely some parts I can understand, but art is often open to interpretation, so it's hard to say what could be a literal depiction of a rocket and what could have just been some noodling around. But many still believe it is just too specific to be a happy accident. Coming in at number 4, the Lolodov Plate. First found near the end of World War II in Nepal by Polish professor Sergei Lolodov, unlike most artifacts, this piece wasn't uncovered but rather purchased. Immediately, he knew something was different about this piece. It appeared to date back to roughly 7000 BC and was covered in mysterious, seemingly extraterrestrial depictions. Most obviously, the humanoid creature in the middle that bears a striking resemblance to the gray alien species, but also the surrounding creatures and, most importantly, how close the disc itself resembles an alien UFO. Next, he showed it to a fellow professor, Robin Evans, who studied ethnology, and knowing that there was something very special about this piece, wanted to know more. So in 1947, Robin Evans organized an expedition to Tibet. Once there, he befriended the locals and learned the language so that he could interview the religious leader Lurgan La to find out more about where this strange disc had come from. According to the leader, the disc was made by the Zopa people, who crash landed in the area around 1014 CE and happily lived there for thousands of years. These people explained that they had come from a planet in the Sirius star system and were unable to return home as they had broken their ship when landing. So, what do you think? Could the disc have been a real creation made by aliens that crash landed in Tibet thousands of years ago? Coming in at number 3, the Baptism of Christ from 1710. One of the most common depictions that often point towards proof of alien life in historical art is a strange beam of light. And while the usual excuse is that it's meant to be a star, an angel, or a depiction of the Holy Ghost, I have to admit this painting does seem a little suspicious. As you can see at the top of the painting, created by Art de Gelder, there is a pretty clear disc-shaped object that appears to be shining 4 bright beams of light down on John the Baptist and Jesus, which is pretty much textbook definition for any alien UFO ever. As far as conspiracy theorists are concerned, this should be considered undoubted proof that aliens came down to Earth. And I will admit, it's one of the more convincing ones I have seen, because I mean, to their credit, it really does look like a spaceship. If only we could just ask the painter. That would make everything easier. Coming in at number 2, the Annunciation with Saint Emetius in 1486. Another day, another strange beam of light shooting down from the sky in a 15th century painting. This gorgeous piece, painted by the Italian artist Carlo Crivelli, is said to be designed to celebrate the announcement by the angel Gabriel to the Virgin Mary, telling her that she would become the mother of Jesus. But if you look closely, in the top left-hand side of this painting is a peculiar disc that almost looks as if it's on fire, shooting a beam of light through the sky right into the head of the Virgin Mary. Plus, if you look really closely, there is another kind of halo-type figure over her head with what looks like a small bird flying towards her. Now, to be fair, this painting doesn't come without a scholarly explanation. The flying saucer in the sky is supposed to represent the Holy Spirit, while the beam of light is meant to be Mary receiving Jesus into her womb from the Spirit. But that doesn't mean that everyone is on board with this explanation. I mean, could it be a religious allegory? Sure. But could it also be a spookily accurate depiction of an alien spaceship hiding in plain sight? I don't know, you tell me. And last up today on our number 1 spot, the Uroboon. The Uroboon refers to a mysterious unknown object that was allegedly found drifting off the coast of eastern Japan. According to legend, an attractive young woman arrived at the local beach on February 22nd, 1803. First discovered by some fishermen, they confiscated the ship before they brought her inland for questioning. But strangely, the woman was unable to speak Japanese and was very different from anyone else they had ever seen. Eventually, they walked her back to the ocean, returned her vessel back, and she left, never to be seen again. Now, of course, when this object was seen, many painters began drawing the strange sight, and this object was also depicted in 3 separate texts. So to this day, many believe that the object in question was a UFO coming down to Earth. Said to have been discovered by Hitachi sailors, the UFO, as many claim, was made of steel and glass and supposedly only big enough to fit one small person. And inside the craft, sailors reportedly found strange scripts that they were unable to decipher. So between that, the woman who couldn't speak the language, and just the general look of the thing, it could very well have been an alien UFO.
Martian fossil. Let's hear from NASA again, this event taking place in 1996 when they announced that they had found a Martian fossil. They said that they had found fossilized microbes within a lump of Martian rock, a meteorite that is theorized to have been blasted off the planet around 15 million years ago before finally winding up in Antarctica, where it was discovered 12 years prior in 1984. They analyzed it a lot, of course, and found organic molecules as well as small bits of the mineral known as magnetite, which can sometimes be found in Earth bacteria. Researchers also said that under an electron microscope, they were able to see traces of nanobacteria. So it seems like evidence is continuing to stack up that other planets are, or used to be, capable of sustaining life. And with a universe as infinitely large as ours, it's hard to say that it's impossible that life on other planets could ever exist. Number 4, the Super Hornet. Let's now take a look at another piece of evidence that came out following the Pentagon's acknowledgement of their Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. This took place back in 2015 on the East Coast and is another video of evidence discovered by the US Navy, this time by a FA-18 Super Hornet, a strike fighter that reaches speeds of up to 2,000 kilometers an hour. That's pretty fast. The pilots see the unidentified object moving at incredibly high speeds over the water, and they struggle to keep up but are finally able to get a lock on it. When they do, they start cheering, and one even says, "What the F is that thing?" They continue to follow it and seem to be unable to figure out what it possibly could be. This is another piece of evidence that had to go through a declassification process before it could be released to the public. Makes you wonder what other video footage and potential signs of alien life the government might be hiding from us in a filing cabinet labeled classified. Number 3, Chicago O'Hare. In November 2006 in Chicago, Illinois, airline staff and pilots alike were shocked by what they had witnessed. Multiple people reported seeing what they described as a flying saucer in the air. It was an overcast day and the UFO seemed to be just hovering over the Chicago O'Hare Airport terminal. They then described how it seemed to shoot up into the air incredibly quickly, so fast that it punched a hole through the cloud cover above it. The FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration, described it as simply being a strange weather phenomenon and they wouldn't be investigating it, so don't worry about it. Of course, that's what they want us to think. But so many people at once reporting seeing a flying saucer shooting through the clouds doesn't really sound like a weather phenomenon to me. One flight traffic control official said, "To fly 7 million light years to O'Hare and then have to turn around and go home because your gate was occupied is simply unacceptable." Number 2, SETI readings. Now let's go back to the SETI project again. If you've somehow already forgotten by now, that refers to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Back in 2003, they were using a large telescope in Puerto Rico to re-examine a around 200 sections of the sky that had all previously shown unexplained radio signals. All of the signals had disappeared except for one, which had actually become stronger. It came from a spot between the constellations Pisces and Aries where there aren't any known stars or planets. The signal was emitting the frequency for hydrogen, the most common element which both absorbs and emits energy. Some astronomers believing that this is the most likely element aliens might use to send a message to us for this reason. The signal from this spot in space has now been recorded a total of 3 times, and has left many people wondering if it is truly a signal coming from aliens. Number 1. The Phoenix Lights. On March 13th in 1997, an event took place that was referred to as Lights over Phoenix, or the Phoenix Lights phenomenon. On this day, hundreds of witnesses reported seeing otherworldly lights across Arizona, Nevada, and northern Mexico. There were 2 main events. The first being a giant V-shaped aircraft that had 5 lights on it, maybe thrusters, though it apparently didn't make any sound. Then later that night, there were a series of red and orange lights in the sky that didn't appear to move at all. And while air traffic control employees could see the lights in the sky, they couldn't see them on their radars. The governor of the state of Arizona at the time said, "I'm a pilot and I know just about every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything I've ever seen. It remains a great mystery." And it really does remain a mystery. To this day, nobody seems to have any real or solid explanation for what the large spacecraft and the lights might have been. It was said that it was a military flare drop, but this came after their original statement that they had no planes in the air, and even a recreation of the event didn't line up with what people had seen, flares flickering and burning out after only a few seconds. I have an explanation though. It was aliens.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the radiation-proof bacteria. In 2002, Russian astrobiologists hypothesized that a bacteria here on Earth may have actually evolved on Mars. Deinococcus radiodurans is the most tough bacteria on Earth. It can withstand even the most extreme conditions, such as cold, dehydration, vacuum, and acid, but the craziest part is that it is virtually radiation-proof. These little microbes can withstand several thousand times the amount of radiation a human can withstand, as well as more radiation than any other bacteria on Earth. You can even find this bacteria on the inside of a nuclear reactor. Like, that's how radiation resistant it is. Scientists did an experiment to see how quickly this bacteria could build up a stronger radiation resistance by zapping the bacteria with enough radiation to kill 99.9% of it, then leaving the remaining 0.01% to repopulate before zapping it again and just repeating the process. It was concluded that it would have taken E. coli thousands and thousands of rounds to build up the same resistance that this hardy bacteria did in only 44 rounds. With this experiment, and based on the dose of radiation they gave each bacteria, it would take millions and millions of years to get even close to the amount of radiation they gave the bacteria in one cycle. Since Earth just doesn't carry that amount of radiation, it has led some scientists to speculate that since Mars is virtually unprotected and receives extremely high amounts of radiation, that these bacteria may have evolved on Mars and gained their resistance in just a few 100,000 years, and then they may have been flung off of Mars by an asteroid and then brought to Earth on meteorites. It certainly is just a hypothesis at this point, but really, how else can we explain this random, superpowered bacteria that is unlike anything else on our Earth? In our number 4 spot today, we have the USO. UFO to USO. Daryl Miklos is an explorer who took a deep dive following maps that had been put together by his friend and former astronaut Gordon Cooper. The map Daryl was using was initially made to help identify more than 100 magnetic anomalies in the sea. During one dive at a location within the Bermuda Triangle, you know, where everything just goes weird, he thought he was going to find an ancient shipwreck, but instead found something that continues to stump researchers and Daryl himself. He came across a very strange structure that wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. The structure had long obtrusions which stuck out from the side, and the whole thing was covered in coral, so whatever it is, it has been down there for hundreds if not thousands of years. Daryl has said, quote, "There's identical formations in 3 different areas, and they don't look nature-made, they don't look man-made, certainly nothing I've ever seen based on my experience, and I have years of experience at doing this. We've identified multiple different types of shipwreck material. This doesn't match or look anything like that." People have started speculating that this structure may just be the remains of a crashed UFO. If it isn't that, then what else could it be? In our number 3 spot today, we have energetic cosmic rays. Energetic cosmic rays are described as high energy protons and atomic nuclei that move through space at nearly the speed of light. There are some that originate from supernova, but there are some that originate from outside of our galaxy, and those ones have scientists wondering where they are coming from and what the source of them is. As these cosmic rays flow into our solar system, their paths are bent by the magnetic fields of both the sun and the Earth. Upon impact with Earth's atmosphere, these rays produce a shower of secondary particles. Some of these particles do end up reaching Earth, but most are intercepted by either the magnetosphere or the heliosphere. The strongest cosmic rays are extremely powerful, and they can have energies over 100 million times greater than a man-made collider. If you're wondering why you should care about this space mystery, it's because these things have the power to cause our digital systems to crash, and in our ever-increasing digital world, that could cause some major disruptions to life. That is why we care about how many of their origins remain a complete mystery that has scientists stumped. And also, because shouldn't we know just where these things that are bombarding Earth's atmosphere are coming from? Concerning is definitely the word I'd use, but honestly, what part of space isn't concerning? In our number 2 spot today, we have the UK meteorite. On February 28th, 2021, reports came pouring in from across the UK of an unusual streak of light that was seen in the sky. These reports were far behind the UK's Fireball Alliance though, as their cameras had already picked up the signal and they were already in the midst of estimating its landing site. That's right, this streak of light was a meteor. It's a remnant of our early solar system that has been flying through space at unbelievable speeds until it came down through our atmosphere and ended its long, awesome journey scattered in a bunch of pieces across rural Gloucestershire. Teams were sent out to be responsible for the recovery of the extraterrestrial material, which was found in a family's driveway, as well as in a sheep's field nearby. This meteorite is a rare specimen known as primitive carbonaceous chondrite, which is said to contain materials that have been essentially unaltered since the formation of the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. The pieces of this meteorite can give us insights into the building blocks of the planets, and it could potentially give us clues as to how the Earth came to be this wonderful planet that possesses all of the resources necessary to sustain human life. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the ancient sightings. This evidence comes from long before any of us were alive, but that doesn't mean it isn't potentially important. There have of course been recent UFO sightings and sometimes even reported alien visits or abductions. But with pop culture and the media and social media, it's easy for us to write these off as hoaxes, or people who are just trying to receive their 5 minutes of fame, or people who thought that they saw something but were mistaken by another piece of human technology. But what about the people who claimed these kinds of sightings long before the internet or international news or even human-made flying objects existed? In our history, even our ancient history, there have been writings and paintings of the potentially extraterrestrial variety. As one example, the 15th century painting The Madonna with Saint Giovanni depicts the Virgin Mary, but also in the background features some sort of hovering disc-like object that looks a lot like a UFO. This isn't the only example, however, as we've also seen some otherworldly beings in ancient cave paintings and Sanskrit scrolls, and there are some people who swear it is also written in the Book of Ezekiel. It certainly says something that potential alien sightings have existed since so far back in our human history, so it must either point to proof of alien existence or just humans being obsessed with conspiracies right from the beginning.
The numerous conspiracy theories surrounding Pine Gap is its alleged role as an NSA or National Security Agency listening post. Edward Snowden famously brought this up, and it certainly makes the whole thing feel a lot more credible. According to the theory, Pine Gap is involved in surveillance and data collection, targeting domestic and international communications, using its advanced listening technology to intercept phone calls, your emails. Edward Snowden isn't the only guy to come out having said this, though. There are other whistleblower testimonies alleging that Pine Gap collaborates closely with the NSA to gather intelligence. Their claim is that the facility's ideal location and the powerful antennas make for intercepting large amounts of data, which is then processed and analyzed by intelligence analysts. Another intense rumor about Pine Gap is that it's involved in coordinating lethal drone strikes. Pine Gap is believed to have the tech and connections to control and direct drones used in targeted killings. So we already know they have the technology to efficiently gather intelligence and track targets, so once a target is identified, the data is sent to operators who can launch and guide drones to hit specific targets, often in remote or hard to reach areas. These drones can carry out precision strikes, taking out high value targets with little to no risk to any human soldiers. The idea that Pine Gap could be involved in operations like this, again, stems from the fact that it's another hub for US intelligence and military agencies. So it's no secret that the US has used drones for targeted strikes in various parts of the world, and Pine Gap's advanced technology would be a major asset for this type of thing. Accusations about drone strikes have been denied, but I mean, of course, they're gonna deny something like that. Targeted drone strikes are probably the most controversial part of modern warfare. After one drone strike in July of 2013 in Pakistan, campaigners claimed the intelligence for the strike came from Pine Gap. There was a ton of outrage, and a number of human rights groups called for a UN inquiry into whether the Australian government could be seen as complicit in the strikes alongside the US military. There were even some allegations that Australian officials might have facilitated targeted killing, which would be against international law. Now, on to the stuff you've all been waiting for, of course, aliens and UFOs. Pine Gap has been a hotspot for conspiracy theories involving extraterrestrial research pretty much ever since it began operations. Some people are convinced that the facility is hiding evidence of alien life and is deeply involved in studying them and their technology. And this isn't just a situation of like, oh well, a big top secret government facility, gotta be aliens, right? No, there have been a lot of strange sightings in the area surrounding Pine Gap. Some people will even claim that Pine Gap is part of a global network of secret bases that collaborate on extraterrestrial research. Again, the American involvement certainly plays into this, so Pine Gap may be another facility like Area 51, according to the conspiracy anyway, where captured alien technology is reverse engineered. This could mean everything from developing new energy sources to building advanced propulsion systems similar to ones aliens could be using. There's also rumors that Pine Gap has underground facilities specifically designed for housing alien artifacts and possibly even extraterrestrial beings themselves. Let's get into some detail on a UFO sighting specifically, shall we? One of the most talked about encounters at Pine Gap happened early in the morning on December 22nd of 1989. So 3 men were heading home after an all-night hunting trip when something out of the ordinary caught their attention. It was around 4:30 a.m. when they noticed what looked like a door. But it was camouflaged to blend into its surroundings. Suddenly it opened right in front of them, and from behind it there was a huge metallic gray disc. The disc moved slightly, hovering over the base for a few moments. The hunters stood there, frozen in shock, and watched as this disc shot upwards and then vanished into the sky. As they tried to process what they'd just seen, they saw the camouflage door slowly move back into place, sealing shut as if it had never been there. Pine Gap employs around 1,000 people, and most of them live in the nearby town of Alice Springs. The workers are a mix of Australian and US intelligence personnel, but Alice Springs has a large American population, thanks to Pine Gap obviously, and visitors and townsfolk will often say, if you ask any of these Americans about their jobs, the common answer you'll get is that they're gardeners. It's apparently so common that it's become kind of an inside joke. Are all these people who say they're gardeners really gardeners, or could gardener be a cover for the real work these individuals do at the facility? Some people think that these so-called gardeners are involved in secretive operations at Pine Gap. Gardening, it's a pretty low-key profession, makes for a pretty convenient front for intelligence personnel and want to avoid drawing attention. At least that's what I'd say if everyone else hadn't picked that front too. I mean, you know, baker, carpenter, plenty of jobs to pick from, guys. Weather control. No, Pine Gap isn't even safe from accusations of weather control. This theory is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The idea is that the facility has the capability to manipulate weather patterns, using advanced technology to create or alter it. And maybe they have help from some of that alien technology they're reverse engineering. Again, even without the possible secret alien technology hidden inside, people see the sophisticated equipment combined with the secretive nature of the facility, and questions start to form in people's heads like, could they be playing God and screwing with the weather? Could they be using methods like cloud seeding or even more advanced techniques, creating rain in drought-stricken areas? That would be nice. Or maybe they're working on ways to weaponize the weather. The concept of weather control isn't entirely far-fetched. either. Various governments have been known to have explored weather modification in the past. For now though, all this is just speculative. We'll just have to wait to see if any definitive information ever comes out about Pine Gap. With all that said though, I've been your host James, and I will catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about real scary stories that will ruin your life. Think we're being facetious? Think again, because these stories have been known to seriously harm people. Seriously, folks. Viewer discretion advised. Click the video now to find out more.